Chapter 2145. Sitting ducks. The Supreme God King paled in fright. He had just escaped death, so he had let his guard down. Coupled with how he had never expected an ambush here, he could not dodge the sudden attack at all. Spurt. The sword shone like the stars as it pierced through the forehead of the Supreme God King with lightning speed, dispersing his soul on the spot. Jian-Shen slowly drew out the 9-star sword of heavenly ways as he looked at the corpse coldly. He showed no pity. He also removed the Supreme God King's space ring. "It's time for me to collect some interest after being hunted down for so long," Jian-Shen muttered. As he said that, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways shone with intense starlight, and 4 stars seemed to appear. Then he slashed at the entrance before him. Spurt. When Jian-Shen slashed out, a Supreme God King just happened to come down from the 8th floor like he was fleeing for his life. Before he could even react, he had been beheaded. Immediately, blood splashed into the air. Jian-Shen, the Supreme God King, roared out in fury and surprise. Before his soul could escape, Jian-Shen's second strike descended and cleaved his head in half, dispersing his soul as well. Regardless of how injured the Supreme God Kings were, they still possessed some battle prowess, but every single one of them believed that they had escaped from the lizard when they arrived on the 7th floor successfully. They could not help but feel fortunate from escaping a disaster, so they would completely drop their guards at that moment. However, Jian-Shen was ready to deal his strongest attack at any time, so his action of sitting and waiting for them to come to him was extremely effective. A few seconds later, another person came down from the 8th floor. Jian-Shen used the same trick, giving no time for the opponent to react or prepare. His sword stabbed out with lightning speed, directly piercing the person's forehead and killing him on the spot. However, a total of 4 people had come this time. The 3 other people discovered Jian-Shen when he killed the first person. "Jian-Shen, how dare you still remain here?" a burly man bellowed out. In particular, when he saw the person Jian-Shen had killed, he immediately became furious. He roared out, "You've actually killed the successor of the solitary sword lineage, Gongzheng. The solitary sword lineage will never spare you." Jian-Shen was surprised. Because there was no one he was familiar with on the 8th floor, he had been guarding this place, and he would attack whoever that came down. He had no time to discern who they were at all. Only after glancing now did he discover in surprise that the Supreme God King he had killed just now was actually one of the 8 people who tried to hunt him down before. It was the successor of the solitary sword lineage, Gongzheng. Gongzheng's dazzling golden clothes were tattered, having been burnt black now. Even his entire body had almost become completely charred. "Bai Legunter, do it," a burly man called out. He was Jia Na, who had protected Gongzheng, Bai and Sanging earlier. With that, the 2 other people attacked Jian-Shen at the same time. Bai's eyes were cold. He held his iron pole and attacked Jian-Shen as hard as he could without any hesitation. Jia Na also drew his god artifact and struck out as soon as possible. Apart from Legunter, all 3 of them had god artifacts. Legunter only used a supreme quality saint artifact. It was 3 against 1, so Jia Na's side possessed an absolute advantage in numbers. Moreover, Jia Na ranked within the top 100 of the God King's throne, so he was extremely powerful. However, all 3 of them were like Gongzheng. They had been injured on the 8th floor, and their skin had been charred black, so they were naturally unable to unleash their peak strength. Jian-Shen was at his peak condition, and with the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, his battle prowess had been greatly amplified. With these advantages and disadvantages, not only did Jian-Shen put up a fight against the 3 of them, but he also seemed to gain the upper hand. Spurt. After a few clashes, Jia Na vomited blood, and his face became extremely pale. He had not been injured by Jian-Shen. Instead, he had directly been smacked till he had half a life left by the lizard's tail before. Now that he had to fight Jian-Shen, it affected his wounds, causing them to worsen. "Let's go," Jia Na called out. He did not dwell on the battle and fled into the distance. "Running won't be that easy." Jian-Shen snorted coldly. He shot out a strand of profound sword chi, which caught up with Jia Na instantly. It entered his soul. Jia Na cried out and fell from the sky. His soul had almost collapsed, so he became so heavily injured that he could not even flee. At the same time, 4 huge stars conjured from Jian Chen's 9-star sword of heavenly ways, colliding with Bai Yi's metal pole. Bai Yi grunted as the flaps between his thumb and index on both hands ripped apart. His fingers shattered, and the metal pole flew out of his hands. Jian Chen's sword did not run out of power after knocking away Bai Yi's god artifact. It plunged into Bai Yi's head. Bai Yi died just like that. Without Jia Na and Bai Yi's obstruction and with his own injuries, Le Gunter naturally failed to last much longer, and he was slain by Jian Chen very soon. Afterwards, Jian Chen arrived before Jia Na, who had collapsed on the ground. Jia Na was crying out as he clutched his head. Jian Chen ended his life mercilessly. Jian Chen took Jia Na's space ring and picked up his god artifact. The god artifact was a sword as wide as a hand. Jian Chen also discovered a thumb-sized bead on Jia Na's corpse. It was also a god artifact. These 2 god artifacts should have been for both offense and defense. It looks like Jia Na could only use one of them, as he was too heavily injured, Jian Chen murmured before picking up Bai Yi's metal pole as well, tossing it all into the Inata Tower. After thinking of something, Jian Chen suddenly took out the space rings he had obtained. After rummaging through them, he took out over a dozen formation discs altogether. Then he made his way onto the 8th floor carefully and set up all the formation discs at the entrance with lightning speed. Jian Chen did not even glance at his handiwork once he was done. He turned around and returned to the 7th floor. The formation discs were either for offense or defense, and they were of impressive grades. With so many formation discs placed together by Jian Chen, it formed a barrier at the entrance to the 8th floor, preventing anyone from coming down. God damn it, who's so despicable that they've blocked the way down? Jian Chen vaguely heard furious roars. He felt extremely elated. Several Supreme God Kings paled in anger when they saw the barrier created from the formation discs on the 8th floor. Let's band together and destroy these formations. They can't last for long against us, a Supreme God King said in a hurry. However, just when they were about to take action, the lizard glanced over. Its tongue shot out and dragged a Supreme God King into its mouth. The other Supreme God Kings all paled in fright as they fled in all directions. There's no way down. Go up, quick, to the 9th floor. Immediately, the Supreme God Kings who originally fled towards the 7th floor all charged towards the 9th. All the Supreme God Kings gathered on the 8th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace fled for their lives. They all unleashed their greatest speed, and some of them directly ignited their essence blood, paying a heavy price to use a secret technique. They fled towards the 9th floor desperately. The lizard from the lava was just too powerful. It was at the 7th heavenly layer of infinite prime at the very least, or even at the 8th heavenly layer. It was not too far away from chaotic prime, so they could not deal with it. Even Zhu Wen, who ranked 2nd on the God King's throne with battle prowess great enough to kill regular infinite primes, was no stronger than an ant before the lizard. Zhu Wen, Xing Man, and the Supreme God King with the laws of death also fled for their lives. They used secret techniques to erupt with terrifying speed. They were at the very front, drawing closer and closer to the entrance of the 9th floor. At this moment, joy appeared in their eyes. They could basically already see themselves reaching the 9th floor and escaping with their lives. However, at this moment, a tremendous volcano flew through the air. The lizard had struck a huge volcano into the air with a sweep of its tail. Perhaps out of pure coincidence or otherwise, the volcano just happened to land where the entrance to the 9th floor was, blocking it completely and cutting off everyone's path of escape. No! The Supreme God Kings behind all bellowed out in regret at this sight. Despair filled their hearts. If it were some other time, they could just smash through the volcano with their strength. Even if the rock of the volcano was extremely tough, enough to be used as a material, they could still smash through it as long as they had time. But now, there was a terrifyingly powerful lizard here. They had no time. The lizard would probably kill them all off before they could clear the obstacle. Not only were they unable to go to the 7th floor now, but they also could not go to the 9th floor either. They had truly become trapped on the 8th floor, reduced to sitting ducks. Zhuya gritted his teeth as madness filled his eyes. He called out, "Since we can't escape, let's fight it out. There's only death for us if we fight alone, but there are several hundred of us and several dozen god artifacts. Let's fall into formation and fight to the death. It's not impossible for us to survive." Jianshen no longer paid any more attention to the situation on the 8th floor. He was about to leave the 7th floor right now and fly towards the 6th. Jianshen had called out Heya. He followed Jianshen's side closely and would give him directions from time to time. "I can sense them. They're over there. Master, the people you told me to memorize seem to be together." Heya pointed in one direction as he said that to Jianshen after arriving on the 5th floor. "Well done, Heya." Jianshen was in high spirits. His entire mood seemed to get much better. Immediately, he hurried off in the direction Heya pointed in. Several million kilometers away on the 5th floor, Ming Dong, Adriana, Shui Yunlan, Rui Di, and Ji Yi were gathered together. I never would have thought that Ming Dong actually comes from the Tian Yuan continent. I heard from the seniors in our clan that our sect of dragons and phoenixes was originally located on the Tian Yuan continent before emigrating to the Beast God continent with the Beast God. The Tian Yuan continent is our ancestral lands. Rui Di looked at Ming Dong excitedly, and his gaze was especially warm. "Ming Dong, tell us about the Tian Yuan continent and the Beast God continent. What's the situation there right now?" Ji Yi looked at Ming Dong with shining eyes. She was filled with curiosity. "It's not the time to talk about this right now. Let's find a way to help my brother instead," Ming Dong said sternly. His face was sunken and serious. He could not lighten up no matter what. Suddenly, a flash of light shot through the air like a bolt of lightning in the night sky that only had the glow of the moon. It shone with blinding light along the way, directly approaching Ming Dong and so on. Ming Dong's worries immediately vanished when he saw the light. He became surprised and overjoyed. Shui Yunlan and Adriana were clearly relieved as well when they saw the light. They were all supreme god kings, so their senses were extremely powerful. As soon as the streak of light had appeared, they recognized that Jianshen was within it. However, when they saw that there was only Jianshen and Heya, they became perplexed and curious. "Jianshen, where are the supreme god kings who were chasing you?" Ming Dong went up to receive him warmly. He looked behind Jianshen cautiously as he felt extremely confused. "They're all on the 8th floor." Jianshen hid nothing and told them about the lizard from the lava. Everyone's faces changed slightly when they heard about the lizard. Clearly, they were stunned. "Ming Dong, I never thought you would have already reached the level of supreme god kings in just a few short centuries, and you have so many god artifacts with you. It looks like you've been doing pretty well in the saints' world in the past few years, so much for all my worries." Jianshen studied Ming Dong before glancing at the 5 divine generals behind him. He felt happy for Ming Dong from the bottom of his heart. Only now did the two brothers have time to catch up after being separated for hundreds of years. "How can I be compared to you? My strength has increased so rapidly because I had endless amounts of cultivation resources in all those years. Coupled with a powerful legacy and various forms of nurturing, it's impossible for me to not become powerful. I am unlike you, who roamed the saints' world alone and made it into the ranks of the supreme god kings in such a short amount of time while having no background at all. Moreover, you're probably just an early god king right now, while I'm a late god king. I've basically reached the end of this cultivation realm, while you still have a lot of room to cover. I'm far worse compared to you," Ming Dong said gloomily. Jianshen patted Ming Dong's shoulder, and after exchanging some simple pleasantries, he looked at Shui Yunlan and asked, "Protector Shui, why are you in the Neptunian Divine Palace? Where's my sister? Have you brought her in with you?" "Her Majesty is very well right now. She's in a safe place and has not come into the Neptunian divine palace with me, replied Shui Yunlan. Her voice was still cold and emotionless, but her gaze towards Jian Chen was mixed. She could not help but think about just how puny of an existence Jian Chen was back on the Tian Yuan continent. Even an ant was greater than him. Yet now, after a few short centuries, Jian Chen had arrived at the same level as her, which shocked Shui Yunlan deeply. She even felt like this was unrealistic. Jian Chen's talent is monstrous, and his rate of growth is just too fast. In just 300 to 400 years, he has grown from a mortal to a god king, and his battle prowess is so great that he can kill supreme god kings from the god king's throne as an early god king. He hasn't reached the end of the path as a god king yet, so there's a lot of room for growth in the future. With his current battle prowess, I'll be nowhere near his opponent once he reaches peak god king, thought Shui Yunlan. Her feelings were mixed as a gleam of light flickered through her cold pupils. But why does he have to be a part of the immortals' world and the successor of the sword sect of Violet Heavens? The esteemed ice goddess was injured by the grand exalt of the sword sect of Violet Heavens in the past, and she still hasn't recovered. Her situation is unknown. She hasn't even paid any attention to the traitors of the ice goddess hall. Jian Chen is still an enemy of our ice goddess hall in the end. I wonder if exposing my identity and throwing the snow goddess into constant danger to help Jian Chen was the right decision or not. Sigh. Whatever. What Mo Tianyun said in the past was not unreasonable. Now that the ice goddess hall faces an unprecedented danger, almost facing death, is there still any use for me to dwell on these grievances? We don't even know whether the ice goddess hall can survive. The priority is for Her Majesty to recover her strength. Only once Her Majesty has recovered her peak strength can we turn the situation around. Shui Yunlan sighed inside. Not only did Jian Chen's rate of growth amaze her, but it also threatened her and filled her with much unease. Jian Chen, on the other hand, became disappointed after learning that Changyang Mingyue had not entered the Neptunian Divine Palace with Shui Yunlan. At this moment, he could not help but think of Changyang Mingyue's familiar face. His childhood memories flashed before him like a fountain as if they were completely new. Even after several centuries, he could still remember them like they had happened yesterday. He could clearly remember that once he was determined to be a cripple who could not cultivate during his youth. His status in the Changyang clan had fallen from a dazzling star to someone that even regular servants could scoff at and harass whenever they wanted to. During that time, his father, Changyang Ba, had grown cold on him. In the huge Changyang clan, there was only his sister, Changyang Mingyue, who cared for him the most back then aside from his mother. She took care of him right down to the smallest details, thinking about everything for him. In the eyes of many people, this relationship as siblings might have been something that could not be any more ordinary. However, to Jian Chen, who had experienced a life as an orphan, it warmed his heart and touched him deeply. He remembered it and was captivated by it, so it became a memory firmly embedded in the depths of his soul such that he would never forget about it. Ever since he separated from Changyang Mingyue on the Tian Yuan continent, Jian Chen had never met her again. He longed for his sister. Jian Chen, do you come from the Tian Yuan continent? At this moment, Rui Di asked Jian Chen nervously as he stared at him enthusiastically. A gleam of light immediately flashed through Jian Chen's eyes when Rui Di mentioned the Tian Yuan continent. There should have only been a handful of people who knew about the Tian Yuan continent in the Saints' world, so how did the person before him know? Perhaps. You are? Jian Chen looked at Rui Di. We're Rui Di and Ji Yi from the sect of Dragons and Phoenixes. The sect of Dragons and Phoenixes was the dragon and phoenix clans that the winged tiger god brought to the Saints' world from the beast god continent. Adriana introduced Rui Di and Ji Yi to Jian Chen. What? You're the dragon and phoenix clans that left the beast god continent in the past. Jian Chen was extremely surprised when he learnt who Rui Di and Ji Yi were. But soon after, he became overjoyed, and a thought crossed his head silently. He had just been worrying about how to find Rui Jin and Hong Lian's clansmen that had left the Tian Yuan continent 1,000,000 years ago in the vast Saints' world. He had never thought he would come across the people from the sect of dragons and phoenixes out of pure coincidence during his trip to the Neptunian Divine Palace. This filled him with both surprise and happiness. He was in high spirits. At this moment, Adriana suddenly smiled mysteriously and said to Jian-Chen, look at who this is. As she said that, a divine hall appeared in her hand, which was thrown into the air gently by Adriana. The divine hall suddenly expanded in the air, becoming several hundred meters long and wide in a single instance. With a deep thud, it landed on the ground gently and kicked up some dust. Jian-Chen looked at the divine hall in confusion and curiosity. He had no idea what Adriana had planned. At this moment, the divine hall's door opened slightly. Afterwards, a woman in a purple dress with a zither walked out. She was extremely pretty, and she had an otherworldly bearing, just like a goddess. Jian-Chen seemed to become petrified the moment he saw the woman. He suddenly froze up as disbelief flooded his confident, handsome face. Mu'er. But in the next moment, Jian-Chen suddenly cried out. He charged over emotionally and embraced Shangguan Mu'er tightly. Jian-Chen, I knew you'd still be alive. Shangguan Mu'er also struggled to keep calm when she saw Jian-Chen. She was elated as she smiled faintly. She stowed the zither of the demonic cry away and embraced Jian-Chen gently, pressing her head against his chest. As the saying went, absence makes the heart grow fonder. After being separated for dozens of years, Jian-Chen and Shangguan Mu'er had been constantly worried for each other's safety in the danger-ridden saint's world. Now that they were reunited, their repressed feelings of yearning immediately erupted like geysers. Mu'er, how have you been in the Taoist sect of divine sound in the past few years? Has it been hard? Jian-Chen said softly as his voice was filled with care. Brother, there's a kid called Jun Kong who's eyeing sister-in-law. You better be careful of him. He's not weak, also a supreme god king, and he has a god artifact, Ming Dong, who sat on the side and consumed god-tier pills to heal, suddenly said to Jian-Chen. Jun Kong? Jian-Chen murmured as he looked at Shangguan Mu'er. He was questioning her. Jun Kong's master is one of the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of divine sound. He's also the person with the greatest talent so far in the entire sect. He did indeed long for me in the past. When I came to the Neptunian Divine Palace this time, Jun Kong was sent by the ancestors to protect me. Shangguan Mu'er told Jian-Chen about the matters of Jun Kong without hiding anything. Brother, don't blame me for not warning you. That kid called Jun Kong wants to kill you, Ming Dong said as he recovered. Chapter 2148, Another Secret, He actually wants to kill me? Jian-Chen was surprised by that, but he soon sneered. He looked at Shangguan Mu'er and asked sternly, Mu'er, Jun Kong is your senior brother. If I end up conflicting with your senior, what will you do? Although Jun Kong's master has shown me kindness through guiding me, I've already helped out Jun Kong when Ming Dong wanted to kill him last time. I did not help him last time because he came from the Taoist sect of divine sound. Rather, it was to return his master's kindness. As a result, I will not object if you want to kill Jun Kong, Shangguan Mu'er said without any hesitation at all. However, then she hesitated slightly and looked at Jian-Chen with worry. She continued, however, Jun Kong's master is a chaotic prime after all, and his master's wife is also one of the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of divine sound. If you really do end up killing Jun Kong, you'll probably cause quite a lot of trouble. So what if he's a chaotic prime? I've offended so many supreme god kings in the Neptunian Divine Palace, and many of the organizations behind all these god kings are far more powerful than the Taoist sect of divine sound. I'm not even afraid of these people, so why would I fear Jun Kong? Jian-Chen said fearlessly. Shangguan Mu'er then thought about why Jian-Chen had been hunted down by all the supreme god kings in the Neptunian Divine Palace. She could not help but ask, what's up with the girl? Is she really crucial to obtaining the Neptunian Divine Palace? The girl is called Xiaoman. She's the descendant of the previous master of the Neptunian Divine Palace, so she carries the bloodline of the previous master. Jian-Chen hid nothing and told everyone about Xiaoman. Everyone gathered here were not outsiders. Even Rui Di and Ji Yi were clansmen of the Dragon and Phoenix clans that had left the Beast God continent in the past, so Jian Chen trusted them very much. Moreover, Xiao Man's matters had already spread throughout the entire Neptunian Divine Palace. With how special her bloodline was, all that was needed was some thought, and it would not be difficult to reach this conclusion. It was no secret at all, so Jian Chen had no reason to hide it. As soon as they heard that Xiao Man was the previous master's descendant, Rui Di and Ji Ye's faces changed. They seemed to have become excited. On the other hand, Adriana, Shui Yunlan, and Ming Dong remained indifferent. Seeing Rui Di and Ji Ye's expressions, Jian Chen's gaze turned slightly cold. He said, I already have an agreement with Xiao Man. I will help her take back the Neptunian Divine Palace and reclaim her ancestors' belongings. Jian Chen's words were clearly a warning, stating his stance out in the open, where even if Rui Di and Ji Yi were from the Dragon and Phoenix clans, he would still be willing to take them on if they wanted the Neptunian Divine Palace. Rui Di and Ji Ye's faces changed slightly when they heard that. After a short moment of silence, Rui Di said to Jian Chen, the Neptunian Divine Palace is extremely important. Ji Yi and I have come under the orders of the seniors to obtain the Neptunian Divine Palace through all means possible. However, since we share the same homeland, we're not outsiders, and that girl called Xiao Man has some ties with you. If the girl gains control over the Neptunian Divine Palace, it might be good news to us. A gleam of light flashed through Adriana's eyes, and she stared at Rui Di and Ji Yi sharply. She said, since your seniors treat the Neptunian Divine Palace with so much importance, they must know just how severe the matters that the Neptunian Divine Palace tie into are. Obtaining the Neptunian Divine Palace isn't really a good matter for your sect of dragons and phoenixes. After all, your sect has only existed for 1,000,000 years. You don't have the heritage or strength to keep the Neptunian Divine Palace. Jian Chen was also surprised. He could not contain his curiosity, so he asked, just what other matters does this Neptunian Divine Palace tie into? Shui Yunlan, Ming Dong, and Shang Guanmu all looked at Adriana curiously as well. Adriana became solemn. I only heard about this from a hall elder accidentally after I returned to the God clan. I only know that the Neptunian Divine Palace seems to be related to the war between the Saints' world and the Immortals' world. I don't know about the exact details. The reason why the Samsaric Grand Exalt of the Immortals' world destroyed the Neptunian Divine Palace was also because of this. Adriana sighed gently when she reached there. She stared at the world within the Neptunian Divine Palace blankly and sighed. That's because the Neptunian Divine Palace was directly responsible for an intense battle between two Grand Exalts. According to the records of our God clan, ever since one of the 7 Grand Exalts of our Saints' world, the Grand Exalt of Ancient Ways, clashed with the Samsaric Immortal Exalt, he has never appeared again. Many peak experts in the Saints' world had once stated that the Grand Exalt of Ancient Ways was already dead. However, the Samsaric Grand Exalt of the Immortals' world was also heavily injured. As he fled back to the Immortals' world, he was intercepted by the Blood-Tier Grand Exalt. In the end, his body was destroyed, and he returned to the Immortals' world with just his soul. His soul then entered Samsara. Jian Chen was deeply stunned after hearing this. Originally, he had thought that the Samsaric Immortal Exalt had destroyed the Daoist sect of Neptunia simply because of the war between the two worlds. He had never thought that there was more to it. Although Jian Chen was unable to understand the true reason, he had realized that the Neptunian Divine Palace was not as simple as just a high-quality god artifact from what Adriana had said. Rui Di and Ji Yi were also stern. If Adriana was telling the truth, it really would not have been a positive matter if their sect of dragons and phoenixes had obtained the Neptunian Divine Palace. Everyone continued to dwell on the topic on the Neptunian Divine Palace. A while later, Shui Yunlan suddenly arrived beside Jian Chen and said emotionlessly, Jian Chen, come with me. As she said that, she flew off into the distance. Jian Chen stared at Shui Yunlan's back doubtfully. After squeezing Shang Guanmu's soft, smooth hand, he said, I'll be right back. All right, Shangguan Mu'er nodded gently as tenderness filled her enchanting eyes. 100 kilometers away, Shui Yunlan formed a barrier out of ice that enveloped the two of them. She stared at Jianchen coldly and said, "Has the space ring that the fifth prince obtained from the Grand Prime statue on the 12th floor ended up in your hands?" "It has. The space ring is with me. Do you want it?" Jianchen's eyes narrowed as he secretly grew cautious. "I had an agreement with the fifth prince. I would help him stop the people who wanted to attack him and make time for him, while all the cultivation resources he obtained would be mine." Shui Yunlan stared at Jianchen. Jianchen frowned when he heard that. "That's between you and the fifth prince. What's it got to do with me? Since I obtained the space ring, it belongs to me now. Do you plan on getting me to hold up the fifth prince's side of the deal for him?" Jianchen had no good impression of Shui Yunlan. Ignoring the fact that she had basically committed a huge sin by ending an entire era on the Tianyuan continent, just her action of freezing Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu on the icy plains was enough for Jianchen to never forgive her. Shui Yunlan's expression did not change at all. Her eyes remained cold and emotionless. She said icily, "Of course it's got something to do with you. Do you know why I've come to the Neptunian Divine Palace? Do you know why I assisted the fifth prince? All of it was for your sister." "My sister? What's wrong with my sister?" Jianchen's expression changed when he heard her mention his sister. His eyes immediately narrowed as he stared at Shui Yunlan closely while he called out. He became extremely unsettled. Chapter 2149, Crisis of the Ice Goddess Hall. Jianchen was just far too concerned for his sister. As soon as he heard Shui Yunlan mention that she had come to the Neptunian Divine Palace for her sister, he immediately jumped to the conclusion that an accident had happened to his sister, or she was hurt. A gleam of light flashed through Shui Yunlan's cold eyes when she saw Jianchen react so violently. She said, "Don't worry, your sister is fine. She's in a very safe place." Jianchen immediately became relieved when he heard that his sister was fine. He also gradually calmed down. He stared at Shui Yunlan as his eyes flickered with uncertainty, and he said coldly, "You said you came to the Neptunian Divine Palace all for my sister. I want to know the reason." Shui Yunlan fell silent. She looked at Jianchen with her cold, emotionless eyes as light flickered in them slightly. Clearly, she was hesitating. Jianchen could tell that Shui Yunlan was hesitating with a single glance, so he said, "If you don't want to tell me the truth, you won't be getting anything from me. You are very powerful, but making me stay is still difficult. As a result, if you plan on taking something from me forcefully, you better give up on that thought." As if Shui Yunlan could see how confident Jianchen was, she sighed secretly. In the next moment, she felt helpless. Never would she have thought that the tiny figure from the Tianyuan continent who was even less than an ant back then would be bold enough to stand before her today and threaten her fearlessly. As she sighed in surprise, she also found it rather difficult to accept. After a while of silence, Shui Yunlan still ended up talking. She said with her cold voice that never changed, "Your sister is the snow goddess of the ice goddess hall. She died during a war in the past, but fortunately, her soul was not destroyed, so she was reincarnated with a sliver of her soul. The great ice goddess used her own bloodline as a medium and predicted that Her Majesty would be reincarnated in a lower world, and she correctly found which world it was. That was why I came to the Tianyuan continent under orders and took up the mission of finding Her Majesty. I waited on the Tianyuan continent for over 3 million years before finally waiting for Her Majesty to be reincarnated. Originally, I wanted to leave the Tianyuan continent with Her Majesty once her strength had reached a certain level and directly return to the Ice Goddess Hall of the Saints' World. However, Mo Tianyun, who had vanished long ago from the Tianyuan continent, reappeared at that time. Mixed feelings filled Shui Yunlan's eyes when she mentioned Mo Tianyun. Jianchen was also surprised when he heard the name Mo Tianyun. He could not help but think about what he saw with Shangguan Mu'er when they discovered the Yinyang Saint Rock. At that time, they had obtained a dual cultivation method from Mo Tianyun, which allowed them to grasp the balancing of yin and yang. As a result, he was able to absorb the energy of the yin-yang Saint Rock successfully with Shangguan Moor, giving him great strength. But at that time, they had only encountered one of Mo Tianyan's clones. It was not his true body. Shui Yunlan continued, Mo Tianyan brought me news from the saint's world. I learnt that something had happened to the ice goddess Hall in the saint's world from him. Another one of the four great protectors, Wu Han, actually colluded with Nan Patian of the Moon God Hall and gained control of the ice goddess Hall, and she's targeting the ice goddess. At the very beginning, I had my doubts about this matter. I did not believe it at all. However, it was also because of Mo Tianyan's warning that I became cautious. When I brought Her Majesty back to the saint's world, I did not return to the ice goddess hall rashly. Instead, I disguised myself and investigated the ice goddess hall situation. When she reached there, Shui Yunlan could not help but tremble slightly. Fury rose up in her chest as her ice-cold eyes also became grim. She said coldly, I never dared to believe that Mo Tianyan's news would be true. However, Nan Patian of the Moon God Hall really did collude with Wu Han and had gained control of the Ice Goddess Hall. Even the elders of the Ice Goddess Hall suffered from their hands. The Ice Goddess Hall has a tremendous amount of cultivation resources and a land of cultivation that is extremely suitable for Her Majesty to recover her cultivation. Originally, I only needed to take Her Majesty back to the Ice Goddess Hall, and her cultivation would completely recover before long with all the resources that the Ice Goddess Hall could offer. However, the Ice Goddess Hall faces a crisis right now, so I cannot take Her Majesty back, and I have to remain hidden, without exposing ourselves. We don't have enough divine crystals and heavenly resources, or any protection from major organizations, and we have to remain hidden at all times to avoid Wuhan and Nan Patian discovering our whereabouts. It's almost impossible for Her Majesty to recover under these circumstances. Shui Yunlan was gloomy. There was a hint of bitterness in her icy cold voice. She said, the reason why I came to the Neptunian Divine Palace this time was not for the legacies. My primary reason was only to collect some cultivation resources so that I could assist Her Majesty in recovering. As a result, when I saw someone gain the recognition of a Grand Prime's legacy, I assisted him without any hesitation, only in hopes of obtaining the cultivation resources that the Grand Prime has left behind. Her Majesty is in urgent need of cultivation resources right now. After learning everything from Shui Yunlan, Jianchen fell into silent thought. He was not surprised about his sister's identity because he had learnt that his sister was the reincarnation of someone powerful back on the Tian Yuan continent. However, he did not care about this. The concern and affection his sister had shown him during his youth had already been engraved in his heart. As a result, no matter who his sister really was, it would never change her position in his heart. However, he had never thought that his sister would encounter such difficulties in the saint's world. It made his heart ache. It was not a good feeling. What are Nan Patian and Wuhan's current level of cultivation? Jian Chen's eyes turned cold slightly as he asked sternly. He had heard about Nan Patian from Fairy Haoyu and learnt his cultivation from Fairy Haoyu. However, that was his cultivation several 100,000 years ago. Nan Patian is a peak chaotic prime. It's said that he's only a step away from Grand Prime. As for Wuhan, she's an infinite prime. With her talent, she has probably reached the peak of infinite prime after so much time, or maybe even chaotic prime, Shui Yunlan replied seriously. Not only was Shui Yunlan the most talented out of the four protectors, but she also used to be the most powerful. However, the time she spent on the Tian Yuan continent had delayed her progress. The Ice Goddess is one of the 7 grand exalts, so how can Nan Patian and Wuhan gain control of the Ice Goddess Hall so easily? Jianchen asked in doubt. Grand Exalts were experts who had truly reached the apex of Grand Prime. They were sovereigns of the world, existences like the laws of the world itself. Even across the Saints' world, there were only a limited number of them, so how could the Ice Goddess be forced to take a passive stance against a chaotic prime and an infinite prime? The Ice Goddess Hall must be a god artifact of impressive quality, right? Doesn't it have an artifact spirit as a god artifact? Jian Chen followed up. A cold light flickered through Shui Yunlan's eyes. She replied frigidly, "You're right. Not only is the Ice Goddess Hall the name of an organization, but it's also a powerful god artifact personally forged by the Ice Goddess. It's even more powerful than the Neptunian Divine Palace. As long as it's in the Ice Goddess Hall, just the artifact spirit's control over the structure would be more than enough to kill both Nanpatian and Wuhan. However, the Ice Goddess Hall has still become occupied by the enemy." "What does that mean?" "It means that there's someone else behind Nanpatian and Wuhan." Shui Yunlan became extremely stern. "Moreover, this person must be extremely powerful, enough to suppress the artifact spirit of the Divine Hall. The reason why Nanpatian and Wuhan were bold enough to turn against the Ice Goddess is extremely likely due to the support of this person." Chapter 2150, Siblings Bond. Jian Chen's heart sank slightly as he became extremely stern as well. Nan Potion's cultivation had already reached the peak of chaotic prime, and he could become a grand prime at any time, yet he still received the support of someone. Without even thinking, it must have been a grand prime. Moreover, Jian Chen predicted that if Nanpatian was really supported by someone, their cultivation would definitely not be as simple as a regular grand prime. Since a grand prime eyes your Ice Goddess Hall, it'll probably be very difficult to resolve the crisis unless the Ice Goddess personally takes action. "What do you plan on doing now?" Jian Chen asked. Originally, he had no ties with the Ice Goddess Hall at all. The fate of the Ice Goddess Hall would have nothing to do with him. However, Jian Chen had to get involved now since this related to his sister's safety. Shui Yunlan was gloomy. There was some worry in her cold eyes. She sighed gently. "Perhaps it's due to our cultivation method, but everyone at the Ice Goddess Hall has an extremely cold personality. Coupled with the presence of the Ice Goddess, one of the 7 grand exalts of the Saints' world, our status was supreme in the Saints' world. As a result, we never befriended any other major organization in the Saints' world. Now that the Ice Goddess Hall faces a crisis, we can't get any reinforcements at all. So probably the only path left for me is for Her Majesty to recover as soon as possible." A gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes, and he asked curiously, "If my sister recovers, can you change the situation that the Ice Goddess Hall currently faces?" "If Her Majesty recovers, she'll be able to resolve the entire matter regardless of who supports Nanpatian and regardless of how grave the situation our Ice Goddess Hall faces is," Shui Yunlan said with absolute confidence. She felt respect from the bottom of her heart towards both the Ice Goddess and Snow Goddess. Jian Chen instead fell silent when he saw Shui Yunlan's absolute confidence. He could tell that his sister was extremely powerful from what Shui Yunlan had said, powerful to the point where she did not fear grand primes at all. He felt happy and worried at the same time. He felt happy and overjoyed for his sister because of her great strength, but he was worried about whether she would still be able to recognize him after recovering her strength. Maybe she would cease to be his sister. Jian Chen slowly took out space ring after a while of silent thought. Jian Chen placed almost 10 space rings on the ground. They were his spoils of battle, including the Grand Prime space ring from the 5th Prince. Jian Chen had obtained far more space rings than this in the Neptunian Divine Palace, but he had tidied through them and grouped the items together before placing them all into these space rings. Afterwards, Jian Chen began to rummage through each space ring, taking out many heavenly resources that could increase cultivation in various divine crystals. He placed them all in a single space ring. In the end, he took out the space ring from the Grand Prime statue and took out thumb-sized crystals that shone with 5-colored light. He moved them all into that one space ring. 5-colored divine crystals. Shui Yunlan could not help but call out when she saw the crystals. Her cold eyes no longer remained calm. She had become overjoyed. But very soon, she calmed down. She stared at Jian Chen with mixed feelings. She had never thought that there would be a day when she would need Jian Chen's assistance. Jian Chen did not glance at Shui Yunlan again. He silently moved the items into the space ring and said, there are over 6,000 five-colored divine crystals in the Grand Prime Space Ring. I'll keep 1,000 of them, and the rest will go to my sister. There are a total of 5 heavenly resources. I'm certain that they're all God tier, but I can't tell what grade they are. I'll keep 2 stalks for myself and leave 3 to my sister. Moreover, there are some pills that can increase cultivation and some divine crystals I obtained from killing other god kings in the Neptunian Divine Palace. As for the fire divine crystals, I collected them from the bottom of the lava. Originally, I planned on exchanging them for 5-colored divine crystals to pay for the fees of teleportation formations across planes, but since I've already obtained quite a lot of 5-colored divine crystals from the Grand Prime Space Ring, I obviously don't need as many of them anymore. A fire divine crystal can be exchanged for 10 supreme quality divine crystals of the same size. My sister practices a cultivation method that's ice-oriented, so the fire divine crystals will be useless to her. Give them to her after you exchange them. I collected quite a lot of fire divine crystals from the bottom of the lava, so I'll give 80% of them to her in hopes that she can recover some strength sooner. I'll keep the remaining 20% for myself. Jianshan tidied the items as he spoke. He only handed the space ring to Shui Yunlan after organizing everything. Shui Yunlan experienced a multitude of emotions as she stared at the space ring. In the past, she had never thought that this person who was not even as significant as an ant would give her so much help. Accepting the space ring from Jianshan, she sent in the senses of her soul. When she personally saw the mountainous piles of cultivation resources, her body immediately quivered. At that moment, she could not help but tremble in excitement despite her mental fortitude. Over 5,000 glimmering 5-colored divine crystals, several hundred blocks of supreme quality divine crystal, 3 stalks of high-grade god-tier heavenly resources, and over 100 million fire divine crystals. The items within the tiny space ring were enough for any Infinite Prime to become green with envy. This was a shocking fortune that could make Infinite Primes lose all rationality. Fantastic. Fantastic. With these cultivation resources, even if it won't be enough for Her Majesty to recover to her peak condition, it's more than enough for her to become an Infinite Prime successfully. Shui Yunlan was extremely excited and elated. Oh right. Jianshan, do you have any method to find Mo Tianyun? Mo Tianyun is very powerful, a primordial realm expert at the very least. He also has grievances with Nan Patian, so if we can work with Mo Tianyun, we'll become much more powerful, Shui Yunlan asked again. Jianshan shook his head. I have no method of communicating with Senior Mo Tianyun. If you want to find him through me, you'll be disappointed. Jianshan continued, I'll go ask Mingdong and see if he can do anything about the crisis of the Ice Goddess Hall. Jianshan did whatever he could for the sake of his sister's safety in hopes of being able to help her. Don't go asking Mingdong. It'll be useless, Shui Yunlan shook her head. She seemed to think of something, and she sighed gently. It's extremely likely for Mingdong to be. Anyway, Mingdong's background is very powerful. If he can get the experts of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing to take action, they might be able to help my sister, Jianshan said in thought. This had to do with his sister's safety. As long as he could help his sister, he would do anything no matter what it was. Mingdong can use the authority of the Grand Exalt. The other Supreme God Kings might have no idea about his true identity, but Adriana and I know it clearly. If it were someone else who faced the same situation, Mingdong might be able to grant them protection through the power of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing with his identity and status. However, it won't work with our Ice Goddess Hall, said Shui Yunlan. Jianshan was surprised. Do you have past grievances? Shui Yunlan nodded. Very long ago, there was indeed some conflicts of interest between our Ice Goddess Hall and the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. It happened very long ago, so long ago that the 4 protectors did not even exist back then for our Ice Goddess Hall. I heard this from a conversation between the Ice Goddess and the Snow Goddess when I served them in the past. Moreover, I learned from the Snow Goddess that Her Majesty once competed with the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing for a unique treasure, resulting in an intense battle. At that time, the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing's cultivation lacked slightly in comparison to the snow goddess, so she suffered defeat in the end. The first majesty was restrained on an icy plain by the snow goddess and only broke free 3 years later. Now, the snow goddess still hasn't recovered her memories or cultivation. It's already extremely fortunate for us if the people from the heavenly palace of Bishing don't add insult to injury, so asking them for help is even more impossible. It looks like in the current situation, only Senior Mo Tianyun can assist my sister, Jian Chen sighed gently. He also felt helpless as he secretly worried for his sister. Although he still had ties with Tai Ta and the God clan, Shui Yunlan had fallen out with the greatest God King of the God clan, Adriana, back on the Tian Yuan continent. It was not a very plausible option for them to seek help from the God clan. But I don't know how to find Mo Tianyun either, Jian Chen stated his frustration. Shui Yunlan looked at Jian Chen as the light in her eyes flickered. She said, "There's no need to find him. I think he'll come to look for you at a certain time. Your identity will be exposed very soon. Once the people from the Ice Goddess Hall receive news, my sister will be in constant danger. Since the only person who can help my sister is Senior Mo Tianyun now, we can't just sit and wait for Senior Mo Tianyun to come by himself. We better think of some ideas to find Mo Tianyun sooner. I'll go ask Rui Di and Ji Yi of the sect of dragons and phoenixes and see if they can help us or not," said Jian Chen before turning around and leaving. He went to find Rui Di and Ji Yi to ask about the ancient winged tiger god. According to our seniors, after the winged tiger god brought our clansmen to the saints' world, he did not stick around for long and left. He rarely appeared after that. This is all we know about the winged tiger god. We know nothing else, said Rui Di. The light in Ji Ye's eyes flickered. She looked at Jian Chen, Rui Di, and I don't know much about the winged tiger god. If you want to learn more, you're welcome to visit our sect of dragons and phoenixes. Our seniors know more. Afterwards, Jian Chen conversed some more with Rui Di and Ji Yi, obtaining the precise location of the sect of dragons and phoenixes from them. At the same time, he learned of the reason why Shangguan Muri had come to the Neptunian Divine Palace this time. How much longer does the zither of the demonic cry need before its artifact spirit awakens? Jian Chen looked at Shangguan Muri. The artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry had a direct correlation to Shangguan Muri's future, so he cared about this very much. There is indeed a mysterious power that can allow the artifact spirit to recover quickly on the 12th floor. The zither of the demonic cry already absorbed quite a lot of it on the 12th floor before, so it has recovered by quite a lot. Looking at it now, I probably need another half a month, and the artifact spirit should completely awaken, said Shangguan Muri. Her eyes shone with eagerness. A mysterious power that can allow the artifact spirit to recover, Jian Chen murmured softly as if he was in thought. Excitement flickered through his eyes. Clearly, he was deeply interested in this mysterious power. The battle between the Supreme God Kings and the gigantic lizard probably still hasn't ended. Let's rest for a few more days before going up, Jian Chen said to Shangguan Muri. Shangguan Muri nodded, she had no objections. Afterwards, Jian Chen looked at Ming Dong, Adriana, Shui Yunlan, Rui Di, and Ji Yi. He said, everyone, I've agreed to help Xiao Man take back her ancestors' Neptunian Divine Palace, but there are still many obstacles in the future. As a result, I hope you can assist me. Once the matter is completed, you will have my deep gratitude. Jian Chen, don't be so polite between the two of us. Your matters are also mine. If you need my strength, you just need to tell me, Ming Dong laughed aloud and agreed straightforwardly. I can help you out. Anything extra will allow Her Majesty to become more powerful, Shui Yunlan also agreed. I've come under orders, so I naturally can't let you fall in danger. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it to the war god, Adriana smiled faintly. Rui Di and Ji Yi looked at each other. Afterwards, Rui Di said, Ji Yi and I can also help you out seeing how we're from the same homeland. However, our sect of dragon and phoenixes would like 30% of all the legacies from chaotic and infinite primes you get from Xiaoman. Although our sect of dragon and phoenixes has been developing rapidly, we've only been around for 1,000,000 years. Our heritage pales in comparison to many other organizations, so we're in urgent need of various cultivation methods and battle skills that can be used to recruit people. We won't take a single portion of the cultivation resources at all, Ji added. Alright, that's no problem. Once Xiaoman gains control over the Neptunian Divine Palace, I'll give you 30% of all the primordial realm legacies, Jianshen agreed without any hesitation. Jianshen, I'll leave these people to you, Shui Yunlan said suddenly. With a wave of her hand, the group of people who she had frozen up were let out from a divine hall. These people were the god kings who followed the fifth prince as well as Mr. Shu who wielded a god artifact. Yun Xian, Yun Lianqing, and the other god kings of the Yun family were also among them. However, every single one of them had become an ice statue. Shui Yunlan took action and melted the frost effortlessly, releasing their seal. Now that the seal was released, the people of the Yun family and the god kings of the fifth prince regained their freedom. However, when they saw Shui Yunlan who radiated with a cold presence and had remained encased in silver-white armor the entire time, their faces suddenly changed and became filled with surprise and fear. Although our fifth prince hasn't obtained the complete legacy of the Grand Prime, he has obtained a space ring. The space ring must contain unimaginable wealth, so please help the fifth prince. As long as the fifth prince is alive, all the cultivation resources in the space ring will belong to you, Mr. Shu pleaded to Shui Yunlan. Naturally, they had no idea what had happened after Shui Yunlan froze them. Hehe, you're still thinking about your fifth prince. Unfortunately, he's already dead. He died to my hands, Jianshen who stood to one side sneered at Mr. Shu. Chapter 2152, Debts Resolved. Mr. Shu and so on had just been let out of Shui Yunlan's divine hall. They had just been freed. Naturally, the first person they saw was Shui Yunlan. Due to their fright, they explained to Shui Yunlan as quickly as they could before they could even notice the surrounding situation. They had personally witnessed Shui Yunlan's strength on the 12th floor. They were afraid that the fifth prince's flight during the chaos would make Shui Yunlan misunderstand, which would lead to their deaths. As a result, they failed to discover Jianshen. Only when Jianshen's voice rang out did Mr. Shu and the others discover in surprise that the Jianshen that they loathed was also here. Jianshen, why are you here? Mr. Shu's expression changed slightly. After crying out, his gaze immediately sharpened. Intense killing intent poured out without the slightest effort of concealing it. Jianshen, you've ruined the fifth prince's matters and prevented the fifth prince from gaining the Grand Prime's legacy. Our Sky Empire will never spare you, Mr. Shu said through gritted teeth. The fifth prince who was supposed to obtain the Grand Prime's legacy and rise up had been smacked from heaven to hell by Jianshen, which filled Mr. Shu with hatred. Not only had Jianshen ruined the fifth prince's future prospects, but he had also destroyed the hopes of the Sky Empire becoming an everlasting empire as well as Mr. Shu's future. As a result, Mr. Shu treated Jianshen as his greatest enemy. Brother Jianshen, are you really still alive? Yun Lianqing stared at Jianshen in surprise and delight from behind Mr. Shu. The eyes of the young lady of the Yun family who stood beside Yun Lianqing, Yun Xian, also flickered with light. She stared directly at Jianshen. Although she did not say anything, her face was also filled with evident delight. Jianshen smiled and nodded at Yun Lianqing and Yun Xian. However, he did not greet the two of them. He looked at Mr. Shu and said indifferently, there are plenty of great organizations and clans in the Saints' world that I've offended in here. Your Sky Empire is only an eternal empire. You're just a puny existence compared to those peak clans. Do you think I'd be afraid? Mr. Shu's face sank. When he saw Jianshen's fearless expression, he understood that Jianshen really did not take the Sky Empire seriously. Afterwards, he looked at Shui Yunlan with an ugly expression. May I ask how you are related to Jianshen? Mr. Shu had gradually calmed down. He slowly scanned the surroundings and saw all the people gathered around. Mr. Shu did not recognize Rui Di and Ji Yi, but when he saw Ming Dong who sat on the floor as he recovered, his heart immediately sank. Jian Chen, I'll leave these people to you, Shui Yunlan said with her usual, icy tone. With that, she turned around and left, without paying any attention to Mr. Shu and so on. Mr. Shu and the remaining guards instantly paled. They could tell from her words that the terrifyingly powerful Supreme God King with the powers of ice was on the same side as Jian Chen. Excuse me. If I've seen correctly, you should have grievances with that other person. May I ask just what benefits Jian Chen has promised you such that the two of you set this grievance aside temporarily and are working with him? If you are willing to assist us, I believe we can also give you what Jian Chen has offered, Mr. Shu said to Adriana as a final ray of hope shone in his eyes. Adriana was not cold like Shui Yunlan. She looked at Mr. Shu and the others with sympathy and said, Jian Chen is the friend of the esteemed war god of our god clan. I've come under the war god's orders to assist Jian Chen. You were wrong from the beginning when you chose to become enemies with Jian Chen. What? The god clan, friend of the war god? Mr. Shu was stunned as he stared at Adriana blankly. Bitterness filled him. Only at that moment did he finally realize just how stupid of a decision it was to become enemies with Jian Chen. The matter has already developed to this point. It's useless even if you have regrets, Jian Chen said coldly. He held the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, which shone with starlight, swinging it towards them mercilessly. At that moment, Mr. Shu and the remaining guards of the 5th prince were all slain. Only the few people of the Yun family remained. The people of the Yun family looked at the corpses, and they seemed to become absent-minded. All of them could still clearly remember how Jian Chen, Kaya, and Chanlong were loathed when they first boarded the Yun family spaceship. Especially when they learned that the 3 of them had taken up 3 of the Yun family spots for the entry to the Neptunian Divine Palace. Back then, most of them became displeased. At that time, none of them took Jian Chen and Kaya seriously, as they were only over-gods. However, none of them had ever thought that the Jian Chen they looked down on before would create such an astonishing disturbance in the Neptunian Divine Palace, where even the 5th prince and Mr. Shu who were powerful enough to make them suffocate ended up dying to Jian Chen's hands. All the remaining god kings of the Yun family were amazed as they looked at Jian Chen as he wielded the 9-star sword of heavenly ways right now. Brother Lianqing, the Neptunian Divine Palace hasn't been very peaceful. It's better for you to leave sooner, Jian Chen said to Yun Lianqing. The only person he knew out of all the god kings of the Yun family was Yun Lianqing. Yun Lianqing looked at Jian Chen with extremely mixed feelings. He said, the appearance of the Neptunian moon has made the Neptunian Divine Palace into a world of those supreme god kings. In reality, our Yun family wanted to leave the Neptunian Divine Palace long ago if it had not been for the 5th prince. Now that the 5th prince no longer restricts us, we will naturally be leaving soon. Brother Jian Chen, we will be leaving first. Farewell. With that, Yun Lianqing left with the god kings of the Yun family. Yun Xian walked at the very back. When she brushed past Jian Chen, she halted slightly and looked at him with mixed feelings. She said softly, "Thank you for assisting me. I will never forget about the kindness you have shown. I just hope that you can forgive me for my mistakes in the past." Yun Xian and Yun Lianqing departed. They left this place, the Neptunian Divine Palace, together, ending their trip in the Neptunian Divine Palace prematurely. What's your relationship with her? Shangguan Mu'er stared right at Jian Chen as if she was interrogating him. It's nothing complicated. We were just working with the Yun family. Jian Chen remained indifferent and roughly explained his deal with the Yun family. Adriana, I found this in the 5th prince's space ring. It's filled with a churning presence of life. I was wondering if this would be useful to you. At this moment, Jian Chen took out a green bead that was the size of a peach pit. As soon as the bead appeared, a dense life force permeated the surroundings. Just a breath of it would be enough for people to experience an illusion that their vitality was growing. Adriana's eyes lit up, and she said, that's a life star core. I helped out the 5th prince before because they were willing to give me a life star core for my efforts. I never thought it would be different from what they said, where the life star core was supposed to be in their empire. Instead, the 5th prince carried it with him. Chapter 2153, The Person Behind It All, 1. A few days later, Jian Chen and the others tidied themselves up and set off once again. They headed off towards the 12th floor. Very soon, they arrived on the 7th floor. They slowed down at this moment, and they all became cautious. Even the most powerful of the group, Shui Yunlan and Adriana, did not dare to be careless. A few days have passed. I wonder what's the outcome of the battle between the Supreme God Kings and the Lizard. Jian Chen stopped sternly several 100,000 kilometers away from the entrance to the 8th floor. He stared ahead with some worry. The senses of his soul shot out and flooded the region ahead of him rapidly, enveloping a range of 1,000,000 kilometers instantly. Wait here. I'll go check on the situation up ahead, Jian Chen said to everyone. With that, he shot off with lightning speed, vanishing from before everyone. He traveled tens of thousand kilometers in a matter of seconds. Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Roy Di, Ji Yi, Shengguan Mu'er, Ming Dong and so on all remained where they were subconsciously. They gazed in Jian Chen's direction from high up in the sky as the senses of their souls appeared, surging ahead to observe what was happening there. Clearly, they all knew that Jian Chen had drawn out an extremely terrifying lizard from the lava on the 8th floor. Against a lizard that had reached late infinite prime, even the supreme god kings who ranked high up on the god king's throne did not have confidence in dealing with it. As a result, they were all extremely vigilant. There are people near the entrance, and there's quite a few of them. Let's go up and have a look as well. Adriana dispersed the senses of her soul and said to the people beside her. Afterwards, they all flew in the direction that Jian Chen had left in. Over 20 god kings sat scattered around the entrance to the 8th floor. All of them were pale and haggard. Their clothes were tattered, and even the supreme quality saint artifacts armor of some supreme god kings had been damaged or destroyed, revealing their skin that had been charred black. Clearly, all of them were heavily injured. Half of them only had half of their lives left. There were even a handful of people who seemed like they were at the gates of death, where their life force dimmed. Many of them were missing limbs. It was also because of the severity of their injuries that many of them were powerless to keep moving. They did not even have the energy to find an obscure place to heal. They could only scatter themselves at the entrance, maintaining a certain distance from one another as they healed through high-grade pills. Suddenly, a streak of light shot through the air like a comet. It covered a great distance in a split second and immediately arrived near the entrance to the 8th floor. It turned into a young man with a striking appearance. The arrival of this person alarmed the healing god kings. When they opened their eyes and saw who it was, all of their faces changed. Fury filled their eyes. Clearly, they hated this person to their bones. Jian Chen, how dare you come here, Jian Chen, you sly, despicable man. You've caused the deaths of hundreds of supreme god kings. You deserve a horrible death. You need to pay a heavy price for your actions. There is no longer anywhere safe for you in the saints' world. Half of the god kings there bellowed out. They all gritted their teeth. They hated Jian Chen from the bottom of their heart. The other half stared at Jian Chen closely. They were cautious, ready to flee at any time. Jian Chen snorted coldly in response to the furious curses. He said sternly, in order to hunt me down, hundreds of supreme god kings went as far as to chase me from the 12th floor to the 5th floor before going back to the 8th floor. May I ask if I've ever offended you? Have I ever provoked you? Are only you lot allowed to hunt me down while I'm not supposed to do anything in retaliation? If you had just handed over the girl in a straightforward manner, would there be anyone who would continue making things difficult for you? You brought this all on yourself, said a supreme god king. Even though he was very injured, his gaze was still ice cold. I brought this all on myself? Ha ha ha, then can't I say you brought this all on yourselves as well? If you hadn't forced me like this, and if you hadn't tried to hunt me down mercilessly, how would you have ended up like this? Jian Chen gradually drew closer as he said that. His face was cold, and his eyes slowly shone with intense killing intent. He said frigidly, "If I lost, I would have probably been reduced to a cold corpse long ago. Unfortunately, from the looks of things, I'm not the one who lost. Instead, you lost. As a result, the people who should become corpses are you lot." Jian Chen held the 9-star sword of heavenly ways in his hand. It shone with faint starlight. As the might of the god artifact was gradually unleashed, the light shone brighter and brighter, just like a star. All the supreme god kings before him were heavily injured. Clearly, they were in no shape to retaliate. Jian Chen was ready to kill them. "Jian Chen, they can't pose a threat to you anymore, so just let them go. Don't kill them all off." At this moment, Adriana's voice rang out from behind. She, Shui Yunlan, and the others had caught up from behind. "If you let them go, the news about Her Majesty will definitely be revealed even faster." "Kill them all," Shui Yunlan said coldly. Adriana stared at Shui Yunlan furiously and said, "There must have been quite a lot of people who left the Neptunian Divine Palace in the past few days. It's impossible to hide everything that happened in here from the outsiders. Your existence has probably already reached the outside. Killing them would be useless." Adriana paused before glancing past the Supreme God Kings, "And I'm certain that even if you try to kill them, you can't get all of them. As long as one of them escapes, the deaths of the others will be learnt by their various clans and organizations. Major clans and organizations all stand behind these people. They might even be famed, peak organizations in the Saints' world. If the people behind them learn that the supreme prodigies they nurtured with so much effort died to your hands, they'll never spare you. The entire Saints' world might end up hunting you down. Many god kings have already died on the 8th floor to that lizard. Their deaths are directly related to me, so the organizations behind them will definitely come looking for me. I've already offended so many major organizations, so it won't hurt to offend a few more," said Jian Chen. "That's different." Adriana shook her head gently. "Although the deaths of those people are related to you, you still didn't kill them personally. Moreover, the fact that the Neptunian Divine Palace has been hiding such a powerful lizard in the lava has taken everyone by surprise. They weren't expecting it. As a result, as long as our god clan intervenes in this matter and speaks up for you, they might not look into it anymore. If the people from the heavenly palace of Bisheng are willing to step forward as well, it would be even better." Chapter 2154, The Person Behind It All, 2. Since these people have taken part in the fight for the Neptunian Divine Palace, there will definitely be injuries and deaths. Survival of the fittest, where the weak get preyed on, is the unchanging law of this world. If we spare these people because their backgrounds and origins are too powerful, wouldn't it mean I'd have to avoid them like the plague when I see them in the future? If the organizations behind these people offend me and target me, am I supposed to just endure it and let them off time and time again? Are they allowed to hunt me down fearlessly because they have an impressive background, while the me without a background can't kill them? Jian Chen argued coldly. His face gradually became ugly as he watched Adriana block him. Although Adriana was not as powerful as Shui Yunlan, she was far more powerful than him. If she insisted on stopping him, killing the people before him would not be easy. "Jian Chen, I'm doing this because I'm thinking for you. Even if you don't plan on considering things for yourself, you need to consider things for the people behind you. If you really offend the organizations behind them too much, they'll probably look into your origins and exact revenge on the people behind you. I also know that your brother Ming Dong is from the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Ming Dong will definitely stand by your side and protect the people behind you, preventing those major organizations from acting up openly." "But what about under the table?" Adriana persuaded sincerely. She did not wish to see these powerless supreme god kings die to Jian Chen's hands. "Petty kindness," Shui Yunlan said coldly from one side. Her heart was just as cold she seemed, completely emotionless. She was a cold-blooded person. Jian sank into his thoughts after listening to Adriana's explanation. The light in his eyes flickered as he also hesitated for a moment. He thought about the Tian Yuan clan in the southern region of the distant Cloud Plain. Basically all the people who had come with him to the Saints' world in the past had settled down in the Tian Yuan clan. If the Tian Yuan clan really faced a disaster because of him, he would probably never be able to forgive himself. All right then. For the sake of Adriana, I'll spare you lot this time. Jian still listened to Adriana's suggestion after a while of thought. The injured Supreme God Kings were all relieved when they heard that. They had suffered heavy wounds during the battle against the gigantic lizard. Half of them had even lost the ability to flee. They would definitely be dead if Jian wanted to kill them for real. Although the other half still had some energy to use forbidden techniques to escape, they would have to pay an incredible price. They really did not want to use a self-mutilating method of escape unless they had to. As a result, everyone was relieved when they heard that Jian would not be killing them. At this moment, Jian eyes suddenly narrowed. He glanced past them coldly and said seriously, "Of course, I'm only sparing you this one time. If you become my enemy again in the Neptunian Divine Palace, don't blame me for being merciless." Jian snorted coldly before making his way onto the 8th floor. After Jian left, the pale-faced and haggard Ming Dong also glanced at the Supreme God Kings in a threatening manner. He sniggered, "Did you hear my brother's words? If you continue to oppose my brother, it won't just be grievances with Jian. You'll also become an enemy of me. I know you all come from major organizations and clans, and you have very powerful backgrounds. If the organizations behind you are bold enough to make trouble for my brother, Ming Dong, swear on my life that I will use the power of the heavenly palace of Bisheng and make the organizations pay a heavy price." After throwing that out there, Ming Dong left with the 5 divine generals behind him, following Jian to the 8th floor. The expressions of the Supreme God Kings all changed when they heard Ming Dong's threat. All of them feared the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Even if the Inata Grand Prime who watched over the organization was dead, the heavenly palace of Bisheng was still an existence that stood at the apex of the Saints' world. This matter ends here. I can save you once, but not a second time. Jian is the friend of our esteemed war god. I've said everything now. You're on your own now. Adriana gazed at the injured Supreme God Kings with mixed feelings and showed sympathy. Among the volcanoes on the 8th floor, Jian stood with the damaged Inata Tower in his hand. He hovered in the sky as he observed the surroundings cautiously. The senses of his soul swept out as he observed the surroundings time and time again. He was ready to enter the Inata Tower at any time. The gigantic lizard is not outside. I wonder what happened during its battle with the Supreme God Kings. Has it returned to the depths of the lava, or has it left this floor to hunt down the other Supreme God Kings? Jian wondered. Several days had already passed now, and the 8th floor had recovered its peace. Only the vast expanse of heavily damaged volcanoes depicted the intense battle that happened on the floor earlier. At this moment, Adriana appeared behind Jian. She studied the messy surroundings and said, "I learned from those people that all the Supreme God Kings trapped on this floor worked together and engaged in a battle to the death against the lizard. In the end, in exchange for the lives of almost 400 Supreme God Kings, they heavily injured the lizard, and it returned to the lava. The gigantic lizard should have been around the 8th heavenly layer of Infinite Prime." The 8th heavenly layer of Infinite Prime? That's quite unexpected. I never thought that such a powerful lizard would be heavily injured by a group of God Kings, Jian sighed emotionally. However, he also knew that these God Kings were nothing short of extraordinary. They all ranked on the God King's throne, and every single one of them possessed extremely great battle prowess. They also had several dozen God artifacts. Otherwise, let alone a few hundred God Kings, even if there were over 1,000 of them, they would have all been slaughtered by the lizard. Adriana shot a glance at Jian unhappily and said, "You're still not satisfied? Do you want to see the lizard kill all the Supreme God Kings and only then will you be satisfied?" Adriana sighed gently when she reached there. She became sorrowful. We've lost several hundred Supreme God Kings all of a sudden. That means almost half of all the names on the God King's throne have vanished. It has probably caused a huge ruckus outside now. What happened here has probably alarmed quite a few Grand Primes. There will definitely be Grand Primes waiting outside once we leave, Shui Yunlan said grimly. She looked at Jian Chen and said sternly, now that it's like this, I can no longer leave through the main door of the Neptunian Divine Palace. The only way for me to leave is for the girl to gain the recognition of the Neptunian Divine Palace, and then send us off with the teleportation formation in here. Chapter 2155, The Person Behind It All, 3, Jian Chen's heart also sank. He understood what Shui Yunlan was saying. After the Ice Goddess Hall had fallen into a crisis, Shui Yunlan was afraid that the person in control of the Ice Goddess Hall would find her and discover his sister's whereabouts as a result. Hence, Shui Yunlan needed to act carefully and not expose herself before those peak experts who could basically peer into everything. This was because no one could be certain whether any of the people who assisted the traders of the Ice Goddess Hall among these peak experts. No one could be certain whether any of them bore ill intentions towards the Ice Goddess Hall or his sister either. Shui Yunlan's fate would be evident if an expert like that existed outside once she left through the main door. With Shui Yunlan's strength, she could claim to be invincible in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Apart from Qing Shan, who ranked first on the God King's throne, Shui Yunlan still had not encountered an opponent that matched her evenly. Even the person who ranked second, Zhu Wen, had to work with two other Supreme God Kings who ranked in the top 10 to reach a stalemate against Shui Yunlan. However, once she went outside, Shui Yunlan would still be as puny as an ant before those chaotic primes or even grand primes. Are you certain that there's a teleportation formation in the Neptunian Divine Palace? Jian Chen asked seriously as he looked at Shui Yunlan with shining eyes. Shui Yunlan nodded gently, there definitely are. It's just that the teleportation formation is in a region sealed up from the public. There are only 3 ways to reach these. The first method is to overcome the obstructions with absolute strength, opening the sealed region to everyone. Shui Yunlan paused there before speaking bitterly. The Neptunian Divine Palace is a high-quality god artifact. Its toughness is unimaginable, so even regular Grand Primes don't have the ability to open up this sealed region, let alone us. As a result, this method is impossible. The second method is to obtain the permission of the artifact spirit and get the artifact spirit to send us there. However, from how it seems right now, this second method is also impossible. As a result, we only have one last method left, and that is for the Neptunian Divine Palace to take a master quickly before obtaining the permission of the new master and having them send us out. It looks like we really have to get Xiao Man to gain the recognition of the Neptunian Divine Palace as soon as possible, Jian Chen murmured. His gaze became determined, and he said, let's go to the 12th floor first. Jian Chen immediately held Shengguan Muer's hand and left the 8th floor with everyone, climbing their way up. When their group arrived on the 9th floor, they discovered over 100 Supreme God Kings covered in wounds scattered around the passageway. They all sat on the ground, silently recovering through ingesting many pills. Jian Chen glanced at them and discovered that they were no different from the Supreme God Kings on the 7th floor. They were all heavily injured and covered with burn wounds. Some of them had even been charred by the terrifying heat of the lava, where a heavy, burnt smell still lingered in the air after a few days. Everyone was scattered in this region because they were absolutely exhausted. Not only were they extremely weak, but some of them were even barely clinging on to their lives. Even just moving from where they sat was an extremely difficult matter. They could not hurry off, so they could only heal on the spot. Although they managed to survive the battle against the gigantic lizard, they had clearly paid an unimaginable price as well. Jian Chen. At this moment, a furious call rang out. Several hundred meters away, a Supreme God King with various parts charred suddenly stood up. His eyes were piercing like swords as he stared straight at Jian Chen. A powerful sword intent radiated from him. Although he was heavily injured and blackened to the point where he was unrecognizable, he still possessed an astonishing presence when he stood up. Zhu 1. Ru Di and Ji Yi both called out when they saw this person. Their gazes were strange and filled with shock. He was the expert who ranked second on the God King's throne, Zhu 1. Not only was Zhu 1 in horrible shape, covered in severe burns, but there were even many vicious wounds on him as well. He was even missing huge chunks of flesh on certain parts of his body. Zhu Wen's long, graceful hair had vanished. It had been replaced by a bald, black head. His left arm was missing as well, only leaving behind his right arm. His current shape really was miserable. In the surroundings, the healing Supreme God Kings all opened their eyes. They all stared at Jian Chen sharply, viciously, and hatefully. Clearly, these Supreme God Kings hated Jian Chen from the bottom of their hearts due to what had happened on the 8th floor. Let's go directly to the 12th floor. Jian Chen glanced past Zhu Wen indifferently. He did not stay for long. He made his way through the group with the people behind him as they continued upwards. He could already tell that the Supreme God Kings were basically incapacitated. They no longer posed a threat to him. Since they could no longer kill him, there was no point in wasting time there. No one dared to stand forward and block them from leaving in such a composed fashion. Many of them had gained a deep impression of Shui Yunlan and Adriana's strength. Coupled with how Rui Di and Ji Yi were both experts who ranked in the top 10 of the God King's throne and the 5 divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bisheng, no one could pose a threat to them in the current situation. Even when Jian Chen's group made their way past them, they still felt nervous and uneasy, as they were afraid that Jian Chen would suddenly attack them. After all, they were nowhere close to their peak condition. Now that they had become so weakened that they were basically incapacitated, they could even die to the hands of an overgod. At this moment, the ground began to shake violently as if it was struck by something terrifying. It rose and fell drastically in an exaggerated and shocking fashion. The origin energy on the entire floor fell into a state of abnormal disorder as well. Even the moon in the sky completely lost its glow at that moment. Losing the only source of light, the entire Neptunian divine palace plunged into utter darkness. The sudden occurrence made Jian Chen's group halt. They were all surprised as they looked around cluelessly. They were surprised and in doubt. What has happened? What is happening? No, impossible. The 5 elements of this space have become unstable. Yin and Yang are no longer balanced. Even the laws of the world have become chaotic. Heavens, I think I see the sky collapsing. The Neptunian moon has vanished. What is happening? It has become much more difficult to condense the power of laws. Cries from the Supreme God Kings constantly rang out from the surroundings. The sudden occurrence made all of their expressions change as they studied the surroundings uneasily. Even without the moonlight, the darkness was unable to affect them at all. All the people there could see very far away in the darkness without the use of the senses of their souls. Jian Chen, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, and so on all frowned. They glanced at the surroundings sternly. They could clearly feel that the laws of the world in the Neptunian divine palace seemed to be influenced by a mysterious power, causing it to become extremely chaotic. It became several times more difficult for everyone to use the power of laws. Chapter 2156, The Person Behind It All. 4. I don't know what has happened, but it can't be good. Look at the sky, Shui Yunlan's cold voice rang out. She currently had her head tilted as she stared at the black sky without blinking at all. Her cold, emotionless eyes bore a rare smear of seriousness. Everyone looked at the sky with that. Their eyes immediately narrowed. Even though the sky was pitch black, without any light, they could see through the darkness and void with their cultivation at God King. Currently, they could clearly see the sky shatter and vanish at a visible rate. It's the artifact spirit. It's the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace. The sudden occurrences to the Neptunian divine palace must be caused by the artifact spirit, a supreme God King healing nearby cried out. He looked at the sky with a multitude of emotions. There was eagerness, excitement as well as unease. Yep. It has to be related to the artifact spirit. Does this mean that the artifact spirit will be appearing? Another Supreme God King called out in surprise and delight. All the Supreme God Kings nearby struggled to remain calm when they heard that. Emotions flooded their eyes. They looked around with burning desire, eagerness, and hope. At the same time, many of them thought of something. The appearance of the artifact spirit meant that the Neptunian Divine Palace was about to take on a new owner. This made many of them nervous. Something is off, Jian Chen growled. His gaze shone like a blaze as sword chi gathered. He paid extremely close attention to the sky as his heart weighed heavier and heavier. The changes to the sky at that moment made him experience a vague illusion as if the sky was being devoured by a mysterious and great power. As a direct result, the sky shattered and was reduced to void. The Neptunian Divine Palace was changing. At the same time, an old man in simple robes sat on the highest mountain peak in the Neptunian Mountains several million kilometers from Jian Chen and the others. He also stared at the pitch-black sky sternly. He was Master Chanlong. At this moment, a small set of formation banners flew out from Master Chanlong's space ring by itself. It radiated with a powerful pulse of energy and immediately conjured a huge python. It stared at the sky with its snake eyes that were around the size of a normal human's head as its thick tail swept about uneasily. What is happening? Why do I suddenly feel very agitated, where I can't calm down at all? The python produced a mental pulse. In reality, the snake was conjured by the formation banners while there was a soul trapped within the banners. Master Chanlong glanced at the soul strangely when he heard that. He said, "You actually feel the same? That means we are the same. I've also become extremely irritated after the sky suddenly changed. It's like millions of ants are crawling on me. I can't calm down no matter what." Even the Supreme God Kings healing in the surroundings seemed to deflate like balloons. They either sat on the ground weakly, or they laid on the ground powerlessly. None of them remained standing. Jian Chen's complexion became extremely horrible. At that moment, not only did he felt like he had lost all his power, where he could not even move a finger, but he could not even use the chaotic force within him. Most importantly, he seemed to lose the senses of his soul as well. He had completely been reduced to an ordinary person. Chapter 2157, Samsara, 1. I can't even use origin energy. What's happening here? Oh no, a mysterious power has invaded my body. Not only have I lost all power, including my control over origin energy, but I can't even use the senses of my soul. My God King level laws that I have comprehended have departed from me. Has the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace suffered an accident? Has the Neptunian Divine Palace already gained a master? How is this possible? At that moment, the expressions of all the Supreme God Kings changed, and they cried out. They all lost their composure as their minds were filled with fear and great dread. Everyone faced the same situation. In that split second, these glorious Supreme God Kings had been completely reduced to ordinary people. Jian Chen's heart became extremely heavy as well, and his face was ugly. He could sense that a mysterious power existed within his body. Even though it only seemed like an insignificant sliver, it was extremely powerful. Not only did it suppress the power of his soul, but even his chaotic force was suppressed. Even his loss of control over his body was caused by this power. What is this power? It's so terrifying, Jian Chen was shocked. Currently, he had become extremely frail. Not only was he unable to stand, but he was not even able to take out the Inata Tower. Suddenly, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. He stared ahead in shock. His gaze pierced through the darkness. With great clarity, he saw an extremely terrifying power turn into thick mist at a visible rate. It rolled towards everyone, blotting out the sky and swallowing everything it passed by. Oh no! Run, leave here, quick! The Neptunian Divine Palace has already gained a master, and they're hostile. "They want to kill us all," the supreme god kings gathered there all cried out. All of them exerted all their efforts to crawl towards the 8th floor. Many of them were panic-stricken because they could all sense a heavy killing intent from the mist that rolled over. It was terrifying, enough for all of them to experience chills. Even experts as powerful as Zhu Wen, Shui Yunlan, and Adriana experienced chills across their body as if they could not escape from the crisis. However, these people had lost all their power. Even when they strained every single muscle to crawl towards the 8th floor, they were as slow as snails. On the other hand, the mist that rolled over with sharp killing intent moved faster and faster. It was impossible for them to reach the 8th floor before the mist engulfed them. Jian Chen stared straight at the almost demonic mist as he felt extremely flustered. He tried to come up with a countermeasure as hard as he could. Unfortunately, he was no different from the other supreme god kings. He too had been reduced to an ordinary person. He could not use the profound sword qi. He could not even open a space ring and take out the cosmic movement talisman inside. But just when Jian Chen was at the end of his rope, his face suddenly froze, and afterwards, one of his eyes began to shine with a faint violet glow, while the other turned to a faint azure. The sword spirits in his body had suddenly appeared. They were cautious about being in front of so many supreme god kings, so they did not dare to appear directly. They could only borrow Jian Chen's eyes to observe the situation of the outside world. It really is the power of samsara, the sword spirits seemed to confirm their thoughts as they saw the terrifying power that flooded over. They cried out, clearly extremely shocked. "Oh no! Master, this power of samsara is extremely terrifying. You can't come in contact with it at all. With Master's current level of cultivation, Master can't put up any resistance against it. Even just becoming tainted by a tiny sliver will doom Master," Qing Suo said in a panic. "The power of samsara from the samsaric immortal exalt?" Jian Chen smiled bitterly. The sword spirits had warned him far too late. It was also at this moment that the mist-like power of samsara rolled in like a storm. It engulfed Jian Chen and all the supreme god kings. Immediately, Jian Chen felt his vitality rapidly leak away. The tremendous life force within him quickly withered while his soul dimmed. He became more and more powerless. In a daze, he seemed to see 6 huge discs hanging high above his head as if they were trying to pull him in. The power of samsara was just too terrifying and frightening. Jian Chen could not resist at all before the power of samsara. Even Shui Yunlan and so on faced the same situation as Jian Chen. Before the power of samsara, none of them could resist. Their life force withered away as their souls dimmed. At this moment, the 9th floor was not the only place where the power of samsara had appeared. All 12 floors had been engulfed by the power of samsara. The 8th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace also became filled with the power of samsara. The burning hot lava below darkened at a visible rate. The power of samsara seemed to be able to permeate everything, where both the endless volcanoes and scorching hot lava were unable to stop its pace. Roar! At this moment, a furious beast's cry rang out. The gigantic lizard leapt out from the lava. There were vicious wounds on it. Its huge eyes were filled with a strange fear and alarm as if it wanted to escape from here. However, the light in its eyes dimmed very soon as if all of its power had vanished at that moment. Its colossal body that had been thrown into the air slammed into the lava loudly, gradually sinking back down. Even the 12th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace failed to avoid this fate. The 4 Grand Prime statues were also flooded by the power of samsara. One of them collapsed, while the 3 remaining statues shone with a hazy light as they endured stubbornly. The only place unaffected in the entire Neptunian Divine Palace was the Neptunian Mountains on the 9th floor. However, the Grand Exalt's formation under the mountains was operating at full capacity as well, forming a huge barrier of energy that enveloped the entire place, blocking the power of samsara. Master Chanlong stood on the highest peak in there as he stared at the rampaging power of samsara outside. He was extremely stern. The huge snake wrapped around beside him. Its illusionary eyes were grave as it stared at the world outside without blinking. Ancient paths. At this moment, an obscure voice appeared in the surroundings. The voice was ancient and also seemed aged as if it had experienced countless eras. It boomed through the entire Neptunian mountains with an aloof feeling as if it was indifferent to everything. Qianlong and the huge python's eyes narrowed as they all looked at the same place. Right in front of them, a blurry figure hovered in the sky beyond the Neptunian mountains. The power of samsara surged around him, seemingly forming a cloud that he stood on. From just a single glance, the blurry figure seemed like the ruler of the world. He even stood on the great power of samsara. "Who are you?" Master Qianlong asked sternly. As soon as he saw the blurry figure, all the hairs on his body stood up as a chill ran down his spine. All the scales on the python beside him stood up as well, while its eyes had shrunken to the size of a speck. "I am samsaric," the blurry figure said. His ancient voice was filled with the endless power of the universe, disturbing the 3,000 laws and throwing them into disorder. Chapter 2158, Samsara, 2, Samsaric. Master Qianlong murmured in confusion. He found the name to be familiar as if he had heard it somewhere before. However, in the next moment, Master Qianlong shuddered violently. He stared right at the blurry figure outside the Neptunian mountains and cried out in shock, "Why, you're the Samsaric immortal exalt who destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia single-handedly." After learning the person's identity, Master Qianlong's heart was in turmoil. He was extremely shocked and felt great disbelief. The legends about the Samsaric immortal exalt had been piercing to his ears ever since he entered the Neptunian divine palace. However, every single rumor was extremely astonishing, enough for any god king who heard it for the first time to feel completely astounded. The Taoist sect of Neptunia was a peak organization that shook up and dominated in the saints' world. Not only did it possess millions of disciples, but it even had 4 grand primes. One of the grand primes had almost reached a state of perfection with their cultivation and was known as one of the most powerful experts below Grand Exalt in the past. It was possible to imagine just how glorious and prosperous the Taoist sect of Neptunia had been in the past with such a powerful ancestor. However, the Samsaric immortal exalt had single-handedly destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia that seemed monstrous in the eyes of many in the saints' world. The 4 grand primes, including the ancestor only second to grand exalts, all died in the Neptunian divine palace. No one managed to survive. If it were not for the arrival of one of the 7 grand exalts of the saints' world, the grand exalt of ancient ways, the Taoist sect of Neptunia probably would not even have been able to protect the Neptunian divine palace, a high-quality god artifact. It definitely would have been smashed to pieces by the Samsaric immortal exalt. This was more than enough to demonstrate the might of the Samsaric immortal exalt. Yet, at this current moment, the Samsaric immortal exalt that seemed to belong to legends to Master Qianlong had actually appeared before him in person. It impacted him tremendously. The trapped soul beside Qianlong widened its snake eyes as well. It also stared ahead in complete shock at the blurry figure that claimed to be the Samsaric immortal exalt. Its shock had reached its limit as well. Even though they could not see the blurry figure's appearance, they could sense a terrifying, overwhelming pressure from him. The figure said nothing. He only hovered in the sky silently as the terrifying power of samsara surged violently like a raging river, condensing into a cloud beneath his feet. It did seem like he was riding a cloud. He did not confirm his identity, nor did he deny it. He just silently stood outside the Neptunian mountains for a while as if he was staring at where Qianlong stood. A while later, his figure turned into the power of samsara and vanished like mist. He did not enter the Neptunian mountains. Several million kilometers away, Jian Shen and all the injured supreme god kings laid on the ground powerlessly. They had been enveloped by the power of samsara, and their vitality drained away rapidly. They became weaker and weaker from the tremendous loss of vitality. Our vitality is about to be completely drained away, but the mysterious energy shows no signs of stopping. Are we all going to die here today? Rui Di said bitterly. He did not fear death. However, he found it regretful to just die here unknowingly. According to the rumor that has always existed, when the Neptunian moon appears, something big will happen to the Neptunian divine palace. Many people believe this to be the awakening of the artifact spirit and the selection of a new master, but it looks like this was what it was really referring to, Shui Yunlan sighed. I don't mind dying here, but what will happen to Her Majesty? Her Majesty is still very weak right now. It'll be very difficult for her to survive in the saints' world alone. Shui Yunlan suddenly thought of the snow goddess, who was still waiting for her cultivation resources. Immediately, Shui Yunlan became worried. At this moment, a long howl suddenly rang out from beside Shui Yunlan. Jian Chen, who had originally collapsed on the ground, suddenly shone with a faint, red glow. The moment the red glow appeared, a desolate presence that seemed to come from the primordial past surged out. Along with it came a terrifying presence that completely exceeded Jian Chen's current strength, striking fear in many supreme god kings. Pressured by the power of samsara, Jian Chen used the power of the bloodline from the ancient sky wolf within him. It formed a paper-thin barrier around him. After using the power of the bloodline, the power of samsara that permeated the entire Neptunian divine palace seemed to be pushed away temporarily. As the bloodline's power rapidly drained away, Jian Chen gradually recovered some strength. He sat up with great difficulty. His actions immediately stunned everyone present. They all stared at him and showed shock. Ignoring the gazes around him, Jian Chen slowly closed his eyes and concentrated on gathering up all the power of his soul. He wanted to take out the Inata Tower, throw the people around him into it, and then leave here with the cosmic movement talisman in a single stroke. However, whether it was taking out the Inata Tower or taking out the cosmic movement talisman from his space ring, all of these actions required the use of the power of his soul. If it were some other time, it would have naturally been effortless for him to do that. However, now that he was enveloped by the power of samsara, he could only rely on the thin barrier erected by the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline to gather slivers of the power of his soul and complete what he needed to do. Hurry up! Hurry up! As Jian Chen gathered the power of his soul, he was filled with anxiety. The power of the bloodline drained far too quickly. He could not last much longer. There's actually the presence of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. At this moment, an ancient voice rang out of nowhere, booming through the surroundings. As the voice rang out, the power of samsara in the surroundings churned violently. Nearby, an illusionary figure that seemed to be a part of the power of samsara silently appeared. As soon as the figure appeared, it seemed to dominate the entire world, causing the laws in the surroundings to undergo some mysterious changes. The barrier around Jian Chen shattered instantly as if the laws of the world had pressed against it. Samsaric immortal exalt, please have mercy. At this moment, an azure and a violet ball of light suddenly appeared above Jian Chen's head. The sword spirits had appeared, turning into a young man and woman who seemed to be in their 20s. They gazed at the blurry figure excitedly. The appearance of the sword spirits caused the power of samsara around the samsaric immortal exalt to pulse unnaturally. He called out, Ziying, Qing Sua, why have the two of you appeared in the saint's world? The samsaric immortal exalt's ancient voice was filled with surprise. Chapter 2159, Samsara, 3, It's a long story. Samsaric immortal exalt, please stay your hand and not harm our master, Ziying pleaded. His voice was filled with respect. The samsaric immortal exalt strode over and arrived before Jian Chen. At the same time, his illusionary figure condensed from the power of samsara gradually gained flesh, blood, and life. It shone with the light of life, which surged like a tremendous ocean. When the samsaric immortal exalt arrived before Jian Chen, he had turned into an old man with flesh and blood. Silver draped to his waist, and he had a healthy glow to his face. His old eyes were profound like the vast cosmos. 6 blurry discs of samsara seemed to revolve within them, containing the profound truths of the world. It was like he could peer through the mysteries of the universe and grasp the supreme laws. As the samsaric immortal exalt studied Jian Shen also opened his eyes and stared at the samsaric immortal exalt curiously. He felt extremely curious and much admiration towards the samsaric immortal exalt, who was one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortal's world. This was because the samsaric immortal exalt had destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia alone. His strength was evident. He was truly a sovereign of the world, a supreme existence. The first feeling that Jian Shen experienced from the samsaric immortal exalt was that he seemed to be covered in an immortal presence. There was a sense of mysteriousness, like he was shrouded in mist. It seemed like he could stand on the clouds. Even though he just stood there very casually, it felt like he had fused with the universe as the laws of the world. However, when Jian Shen's eyes met the samsaric immortal exalt's, he immediately felt his head spin and his soul lose control. It felt like his soul was about to leave his body and be drawn away by the discs of samsara in the samsaric immortal exalt's eyes. In shock, Jian Shen closed his eyes as soon as possible. He no longer looked at the samsaric immortal exalt's eyes. Instead, he silently stabilized his soul. I never thought I'd meet the successor of that old guy in a foreign land. Sigh, it's just a pity that you cultivate the chaotic body, so your future is destined to be limited. You probably can't bear the burden. The samsaric immortal exalt stared at Jian Shen and signed gently as if he was extremely disappointed about Jian Shen's chaotic body. Naturally, Jian Shen could tell that he was disappointed in him as the successor of the sword sect of Violet Heavens because there were plenty of people who cultivated the chaotic body in the immortal's world, but no one had been able to become an immortal exalt throughout history. As time went on, it turned into a concept that the peak of the chaotic body was Immortal Emperor. Even though the chaotic body was very powerful, known to be invincible among the same realm of cultivation and was even powerful enough to challenge those at a higher level of cultivation, immortal emperors would still be restricted by their cultivation. No matter how impressive or astonishing their battle prowess was, they were still an immortal emperor in the end. Before those supreme grand exalts that seemed to have become the laws of the world, they remained as puny as ants, unable to put up any resistance. As a result, Jian Shen's future was predetermined in the eyes of the samsaric immortal exalt. He believed it was impossible for Jian Shen to reach the same level of cultivation as the old master of the sword spirits. Samsaric immortal exalt, you must not underestimate our master. Our master isn't as simple as you think he is. We believe the rumor that the chaotic body cannot progress to immortal exalt will be disproven by our master, the sword spirits said confidently. They originated from yin and yang qi, so they possessed certain innate advantages and abilities. From time to time, they could see secrets of the world that even grand exalts could not forecast. They knew Jian Shen was extraordinary. Senior Samsaric, there are some people here that are my friends. I hope you can show mercy and spare them this time. Jian Shen was no longer affected by the power of samsara now. He stood up with great difficulty and bowed towards the samsaric immortal exalt out of respect. Currently, all the supreme god kings in the surroundings had fainted with the appearance of the samsaric immortal exalt. Jian Shen was the only one who remained conscious. Don't worry. None of them will die. I didn't hide a sliver of the power of my soul in the Neptunian divine palace for all these years to deal with these kids, said the samsaric immortal exalt. Regardless of how monstrous a talent these supreme god kings possessed, they still did not catch his attention. Senior Samsaric, may I ask how the Neptunian divine palace's artifact spirit is doing now? Jian Shen asked. He had many questions he wanted to ask. Whether it was about the Neptunian divine palace or the immortal's world, he wanted to understand them all through the samsaric immortal exalt. In particular, the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace was the matter that Jian Shen cared about the most right now. The artifact spirit has only been temporarily suppressed by me. My original body is far away in the saints' world, so it's impossible for me to kill the artifact spirit in a short amount of time with just a sliver of the power of my soul, said the samsaric immortal exalt. Jian Shen was shocked. The samsaric immortal exalt had only used a sliver of the power of his soul to become a godlike existence in the Neptunian divine palace. He could casually suppress the artifact spirit that possessed the power of the divine hull. If his original body had come, just how terrifying would he have been? He could probably shatter the Neptunian divine palace with just a wave of his wand, crushing the artifact spirit between his fingers. Samsaric Immortal Exalt, may we ask how the Sword Sect of Violet Heavens is doing right now? Does it still exist in the Immortals world? The Sword Spirits also asked. They were extremely nervous, as if they were afraid of learning something they would struggle to accept. Although they were only Sword Spirits, the twin swords were the sect treasures of the Sword Sect of Violet Heavens after all. The Sword Spirits held a unique feeling towards the Sword Sect of Violet Heavens. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt fell silent, and the Sword Spirits mentioned the Sword Sect of Violet Heavens. His response made the hearts of the Sword Spirits suddenly sink. Sorrow filled their faces. They asked in a trembling voice, "Has the Sword Sect of Violet Heavens ceased to exist?" Jian Chen's heart shivered from that. He felt nothing towards the Sword Sect of Violet Heavens. He had not even seen it before, but he was still the successor of the sect after all. If the Sword Sect of Violet Heavens had really been destroyed, it would be difficult on him as well. Sigh, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt exhaled gently. He shook his head. The Sword Sect of Violet Heavens still exists, but the situation might not be very optimistic right now. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt paused there and looked at Jian Chen. He said seriously, "If your identity still hasn't been exposed in the Saints' world, then it's best for you to stay here for a while. Before you become powerful, returning to the Immortals world rashly won't turn out well." "Senior Samsaric, enough. We can talk later. I have even more important matters to attend to. These matters will affect the future of the Immortals world." The Samsaric Immortal Exalt cut off Jian Chen. He was unwilling to talk anymore. Afterwards, he looked at the unconscious Supreme God Kings in the surroundings and suddenly reached out. With that, the space in the surroundings suddenly shrank up, having been affected. To Jian Chen's utter disbelief, he saw threads of various sizes being drawn from the Supreme God Kings. They all gathered in the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's hands. "These are threads of karma?" Jian Chen's face immediately changed when he recognized the threads of energy of various thicknesses. Immediately, he arrived before Shangguan Mu'er and pointed at Ming Dong, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Rui Di, and Ji Yi. He said, "Senior, these are all my friends. Please spare them." Although he knew that the Samsaric Immortal Exalt would not touch their lives, Jian Chen sensed an ill omen when he saw their threads of karma being drawn out. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt looked away and stared at Jian Chen deeply. His face sank slightly. "They're from the Saints' world." But not all people of the Saints' world are enemies of the Immortals world. Moreover, some of them have extremely close ties with me, enough for me to risk my life to protect them, Jian Chen said boldly and with determination. In reality, he had already become rather terrified. After all, he was facing one of the 5 grand exalts of the Immortals world. Even if he was just a clone, Jian Chen still felt tremendous psychological pressure. Chapter 2160, The Way of Karma. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt looked at Jian Chen silently. His ancient gaze that was as profound as the vast universe gradually sharpened. In the eyes of the Samsaric Immortal Exalt, it was basically impossible for Jian Chen to reach the peak. He believed that it would be impossible for Jian Chen to become someone that a Grand Exalt would take seriously, as he cultivated the chaotic body. However, Jian Chen was still the successor of the Sword Sect of Violet Heavens after all. No matter how great his future accomplishments would be and no matter how far he would be able to travel, he still belonged to the Immortals world. The Immortals world happened to oppose the Saints' world. Under such a tense situation, he had become so close to the people of the Saints' world. This displeased the Samsaric Immortal Exalt greatly. Whatever. A while later, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt sighed gently. The sharpness in his gaze gradually vanished, and his eyes became profound once again. He said, "I'll spare these people seeing how you're the only successor of that old guy." As he said that, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's hand loosened slightly, and the threads of karma from Shangguan Mu'er, Ming Dong, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Rui Di, and Ji Yi immediately broke free from his grasp, returning to them. Out of the kids you want to protect, 3 of them have quite significant origins. They're closely related to grand exalts of the saints' world. If I were to play around with their karma, those people would definitely notice, so even if you didn't mention it, I wouldn't touch 3 of these people, said the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. Every single person had different backgrounds and came in contact with different people, so their threads of karma would be different. Through the threads of karma, he had discovered that Adriana, Shui Yunlan, and Ming Dong actually had karma with the grand exalts of the saints' world. This prevented him from touching them recklessly. Jian Chen immediately became relieved when he heard that the Samsaric Immortal Exalt would not touch Shangguan Mu'er and so on. He looked at the threads of karma in the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's hand and gradually revealed doubt. He could clearly see that there were over 1,000 threads of karma that differed from each other in the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's hand. Over 100 of them came from the Supreme God Kings nearby, while the rest seemed to have passed through space, reaching over here from somewhere unknown. A fire-red thread that was clearly much thicker than the rest raised Jian Chen's attention. Jian Chen seemed to sense the presence of the gigantic lizard from it. This allowed him to immediately confirm that the thread of karma came from the lizard. At this moment, Jian Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed. He discovered in great surprise that the thread of karma from the lizard had suddenly splayed out into many thin threads. The end of each thread was connected to a Supreme God King there, and there was actually a thread that was connected to Jian Chen. Jian Chen's eyes narrowed, and he glanced around. He discovered that the only people who did not have the lizard's thread of karma was Shangguan Mu'er, Ming Dong, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Rui Di, and Ji Yi. They had never had any contact with the lizard from the lava. Karma, Jian Chen sank into his thoughts when he realized this. He seemed to have comprehended something, gaining a rough understanding of the way of karma. I never would have thought that you can actually see the threads of karma, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's voice rang out. He looked at Jian Chen with quite some surprise and said, "You can see the threads of karma means that you've grasped the way of karma." The Samsaric Immortal Exalt retracted his gaze, and he looked at the threads of karma in his control. He said in thought, "Everything in the world is bound by karma, ranging from newly born infants to grand exalts who stand at the apex of the world. No one can break free from karma. The communication and contact of people will lead to karma and the creation of threads of karma. They represent the ties you've formed with these people. The contact between immortals, maybe in kindness or maybe in grievance, will also lead to karma and the formation of threads of karma. Just like the red thread you're looking at right now. It comes from the natural spirit that was born from the endless fire-attributed energy on the 8th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace. You lot have come into contact with this natural spirit and have fought it, so a thread of karma has been formed between you and the natural spirit. However, the people you want to protect clearly have never come in contact or conflict with the natural spirit at all, so their relationship is a clean slate. Naturally, there are no threads of karma, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt said slowly, explaining many secrets about the way of karma, allowing Jian Chen to deepen his understanding. Senior Samsaric, do you plan on using the threads of karma from these Supreme God Kings to find the people behind them? Jian Chen asked. As his understanding of karma gradually deepened, he seemed to understand the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's intentions. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt nodded, "That's right. Since these kids are Supreme God Kings, their backgrounds are definitely significant. Through these threads of karma, I can easily find people that they have karma with. If they have close ties with some chaotic primes or even grand primes, I can even find these experts through the threads of karma. With my mastery of the way of karma and the vitality and bloodlines of these people, I can surpass both space and time to plant a demonic seed in all the people they have karma with. As long as I don't touch those grand primes that are far too outstanding, no one will be able to sense it." Jian Chen was shocked. That way, the samsaric immortal exalt could use these supreme god kings to deal with over 100 major organizations simultaneously and plant demonic seeds in the hearts of countless people. Even some regular grand primes would not be able to avoid this. It was just too terrifying. Although he had no idea what would happen once someone had a demonic seed planted within them, he knew that it could not be good without even thinking. Unfortunately, many people were killed by the natural spirit on the 8th floor, so there's only around 100 of them left, which is all the people here. As for the people scattered elsewhere, not a lot of them have ties with experts, so they're not particularly useful, continued the samsaric immortal exalt. He was filled with pity. Senior Samsaric, why must you do this? Jian Chen asked. For the immortal's world, the samsaric immortal exalt replied sternly. Afterwards, with a thought of his, all the vitality that had been drained from the god kings appeared in the air. Over 100 of them formed transparent little balls of light. They hovered above each supreme god king as they gradually approached their threads of karma. The samsaric immortal exalt had begun to take action. He attempted to use the threads of karma to find the people behind these supreme god kings and plant a demonic seed in the hearts of everything they had established karma with. Senior Samsaric, you're a grand exalt of the immortal's world after all, an existence that stands at the apex of a world. Yet, you're actually moving against these juniors today. Isn't that just degrading? At this moment, a woman's voice boomed out. It was extremely pleasant, just like the sounds of nature. There was a condescending sense of coldness in the voice. As the woman's voice rang out, the entire Neptunian divine palace shook violently. The power of samsara that permeated every inch of the place churned violently. Chapter 2161, A Figure of Supreme Power. The sudden voice made Jian Chen's expression change. He stared at the churning power of samsara in the surroundings as well as the Neptunian divine palace that trembled violently. His heart suddenly sank as he realized that the situation now was anything but reassuring. A supreme expert had already arrived at the Neptunian divine palace. They were strong enough to ignore the powerful defenses of a high-grade god artifact and directly overcome the various obstructions through raw power and rush in from outside, which was more than enough to prove their strength. I never thought the experts of the saints' world would arrive so quickly. The samsaric immortal exalt became stern. He turned around and looked at Jian Chen with shining eyes as he said sternly, the person who has come is extremely powerful. I'm nowhere close to being their opponent with just this clone of mine. I've already erased the threads of karma between us. Remember, do not return to the immortal's world before your identity has been exposed, and even if you do end up returning to the saints' world, do not reveal the sword spirits until you are powerful enough. The sword spirits are unique existences in the world. The fusion of the two swords has the power to split heaven and earth. When that old guy wielded them in the past, no one dared to eye the swords in the immortal's world, but ever since that old guy died, those other immortal exalts of the immortal's world have become fearless. They've been constantly searching for the sword spirits in the past few years, the samsaric immortal exalt warned sternly. Before Jian Chen could reply, he pointed at Jian Chen. Immediately, a great power of samsara slammed against Jian Chen, causing him to return to his previous state despite recovering some power recently. He completely lost control of his body at that moment, and he collapsed onto the ground powerlessly. Moreover, the pain he experienced this time was countless times more intense than in the past. Not only did he become extremely weak in a split second, but he even became extremely drowsy as well, almost falling unconscious. Jian Chen bit his tongue viciously when he was about to fall unconscious as he tried his hardest to remain awake. Fortunately, the samsaric immortal exalt treated Jian Chen differently compared to the other supreme god kings. Seeing how Jian Chen did not want to fall unconscious, he did not force him to. Since you're not afraid of being exposed, allow me to gift you a fortuitous encounter. Whether you can benefit from it will be up to you, said the samsaric immortal exalt. In the next moment, Jian Chen felt the world spin around him. A sliver of his soul had been whisked away by the samsaric immortal exalt, having become a part of him. In a trance, Jian felt like he experienced an illusion, as if he had become the samsaric immortal exalt at that moment, where the samsaric immortal exalt was him. He seemed to have fused with the samsaric immortal exalt. Boom! At this moment, a deafening sound rang out. It was much louder than before, as if it came from the interior of the Neptunian Divine Palace. Have you already entered the Neptunian Divine Palace? You're quite a lot faster than I expected. The samsaric immortal exalt raised his head at the sky and became stern. Afterwards, one of his hands shifted between gestures rapidly, and the threads of karma that were connected to it changed as well. This is my usage of the way of karma. Comprehend it closely. Whether you can understand it or not will be up to your affinity for comprehension. The samsaric immortal exalt's voice rang out. Jian sliver of soul that had fused with the samsaric immortal exalt immediately began to pay close attention, comprehending the samsaric immortal exalt's way of karma seriously. The samsaric immortal exalt was a grand exalt who had reached the peak of a world. The personal guidance of a grand exalt was a fortuitous encounter enough to change the fates of people. He knew that this opportunity was extremely precious, so he appreciated it dearly. The samsaric immortal exalt purposefully slowed down his actions, showing Jian in the clearest fashion possible. He was truly passing on his way of karma to Jian selflessly. Jian clearly saw the samsaric immortal exalt's usage of the way of karma. At the same time, he saw the threads of karma from the Supreme God King's change in the samsaric immortal exalt's hands. As they changed, a mysterious power seemed to become planted in the Supreme God Kings through their threads of karma. Although Jian had no idea what this mysterious power was, he did know that it was the demonic seed the samsaric immortal exalt had mentioned. Originally, I wanted to use the threads of karma to plant demonic seeds in all the people behind them, but it looks like I won't make it, the samsaric immortal exalt said with pity. Just as he said those words, the pitch-black sky of the 9th floor suddenly became extremely bright. It shone as brightly as the sun, illuminated the surroundings completely. The samsaric immortal exalt no longer paid any more attention to the Supreme God Kings scattered there. He stood with his arms behind his back as he stared at the sky. In the sky, a hazy figure descended slowly in the rays of light. As the person arrived, the universe rumbled, the sky roared, and the ground trembled. All the laws pulsed as if the person was like a god of the world. Her arrival caused the heavens and earth to change in response. The power of laws formed a blurry flight of stairs beneath her such that it seemed like she made her way down the stairs as she descended. She radiated with blinding light. Not only did she illuminate every inch of the Neptunian Divine Palace like the sun, but the power of samsara from the samsaric immortal exalt was also slowly purged under the light. Light gradually replaced the space occupied by the power. This woman is extremely terrifying. She can probably pierce through the heavens and destroy worlds just by raising her hand. Jian studied the hazy woman as he had fused with the samsaric immortal exalt, and he was filled with shock. He knew that the woman's cultivation had reached an unbelievable level. No wonder even the Neptunian Divine Palace, a high-quality god artifact, can't stop you for long. As it turns out, you're only a step away from perfection. There are barely any experts in both the immortals' world and the saints' world that can reach your level of cultivation. Who are you? Which organization do you belong to? The woman stood at a level equal to the samsaric immortal exalt. She radiated with light, enshrouding her figure so that she could not be seen clearly. She bowed slightly towards the samsaric immortal exalt due to his seniority and said in a cool voice, I am Exian. My master is the Anata Grand Exalt. Greetings to Senior Samsaric. I never would have thought that Anata has such an outstanding disciple. I can see that your presence of laws is close to being full, and your soul is astonishing. The final step to completion shouldn't be far away for you, the samsaric immortal exalt sighed emotionally. Chapter 2162, Samsara returns. Thank you for your praise, Senior Samsaric, Exian said calmly and emotionlessly. Afterwards, she stared at the nearby Ming Dong for a while before glancing across the Supreme God Kings there slowly. She said, "Senior Samsaric, you're a renowned grand exalt of the immortals world, an existence revered by all immortals. Now, you're actually moving against these juniors today. Isn't that just degrading with your status?" The Samsaric immortal exalt completely disdained to explain. He stood above the clouds in the air with his arms behind his back as a powerful presence flooded out. He chuckled, "Cut the bullsh *T. Do it. I'd like to see how long you take to disperse this clone of mine." Exin's eyes immediately narrowed when she heard that. She clasped her fist towards the Samsaric immortal exalt gently and said coldly, "If that's the case, I'll be causing offense." With that, the Exin shrouded by light suddenly became extremely blinding. Her presence surged up, destroying space, shattering the sky, and making the galaxies pale. The entire 9th floor seemed to approach ruin. Of course, this was only an illusion, a grand scene created on the 9th floor because Exin's presence was just too terrifying. The Neptunian Divine Palace was a high-quality god artifact after all. It was extremely tough, where even with Exin's astonishing strength, she was unable to destroy an entire floor through her presence alone. At this moment, Exin took action. Her figure floated firmly in the air as her slender hand gently pressed towards the Samsaric immortal exalt from afar. With that, the laws of the universe immediately appeared and formed chains. An unimaginable force seemed to compress the space before her, directly collapsing the space into darkness. The collapsed space rapidly spread towards the Samsaric immortal exalt at an unbelievable pace. Jian Chen personally witnessed Exin's attack, as he had fused with the Samsaric immortal exalt. Immediately, he became extremely shocked. Exin was just too powerful. The level at which she stood had completely surpassed the boundary of Jian Chen's understanding and knowledge. Just a casual strike from her materialized the laws of the world, filled with endless mysteries. The terrifying power directly caused the tough space of the Neptunian Divine Palace to collapse. The Samsaric immortal exalt's face did not change, but his old eyes still ended up becoming filled with sternness. He extended a finger at the sky, and the power of samsara surged out from behind him. It condensed into 6 huge, black holes as a disk of samsara above his head as the power of samsara surged out endlessly. The Samsaric immortal exalt engaged in an intense battle against Exin in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Energy collided with energy as laws clashed with laws, creating deafening booms and causing the space of the Neptunian Divine Palace to constantly collapse. The sky had already been destroyed, having descended into darkness while the ground had vanished as well, becoming a bottomless chasm. The entire Neptunian Divine Palace had almost been pierced all the way through. As a sliver of Jian Chen's soul had fused with the Samsaric immortal exalt, he actually felt like he was in the Samsaric immortal exalt's shoes as he fought Exin. It was like it was not the Samsaric immortal exalt fighting but himself. Not only could he sense wonders of the laws of destruction from Exin, but he could also clearly sense the power of samsara used by the Samsaric immortal exalt. Moreover, Jian Chen was deeply exposed to their usage of energy, tricks with laws, and the feeling as if they were a part of laws. He benefited greatly, feeling that a gate had been opened for him, allowing him to see the world in another way. However, times of happiness would always be fleeting. The state of being submerged in joy as he absorbed the battle experience from the two supreme experts only lasted for a few seconds. Afterwards, he was forced out. Immediately, heavy exhaustion descended. Only now did he come to the realization that the sliver of his soul that had fused with the Samsaric immortal exalt had become extremely weak. Moreover, he could closely sense that the Samsaric immortal exalt had become extremely weak, so weak that his clone had almost dispersed in the wind. Even though it remained stable under the Samsaric immortal exalt's great control, he could not last for long. He neared collapse. On the other side, Exin basked in light as she stood there unscathed. The laws of the universe revolved around her. She seemed like a supreme goddess, otherworldly and transcendent. The Samsaric immortal exalt was finally defeated in his battle against Exin. After all, Exian's cultivation was so great that she only required one last step before she reached completion. She was one of the few supreme experts in the saints' world, an existence that stood at the apex and was only second to grand exalts. Although the samsaric immortal exalt was revered as one of the grand exalts of the immortals' world, he was naturally not Exian's opponent when he was just a clone. Although I don't have high hopes for you because you cultivate the chaotic body, maybe you really are different since the sword spirits have chosen you. I hope that you really can be like what the sword spirit said and create a miracle. At this moment, the samsaric immortal exalt's voice rang out in Jian Chen's soul. Even though the samsaric immortal exalt's soul was about to collapse, the voice was still filled with force. This was a form of mental communication, so even when the supreme Exian was nearby, she was unable to detect this voice. There's one more matter that you must remember. Do not let the pernight ore on the 8th floor fall into the hands of people from the saints' world. Although it's only a high-grade god-tier material, it's something crucial to making an ultimate weapon. This kind of weapon does not come from this aeon. It can be traced back to the previous aeon or even the aeon before that. Its power cannot be imagined by experts of this aeon. Once it is forged, the immortals' world and the demons' worlds will face disaster. In the past, I journeyed to the saints' world alone and destroyed the Daoist sect of Neptunia because of all the pernight ore in their possession. Even the clone I left here was primarily for the pernight organ. Using the threads of karma to plant a demonic seed in the people behind the supreme god kings was only a secondary reason. Originally, I wanted to plant demonic seeds in the people behind these supreme god kings through their threads of karma before finding a way to destroy the pernight ore or directly taking it away. However, I had never thought that when I disturbed the heavenly secrets to prevent the grand exalts of the saints' world from peering into what was happening, a supreme expert of the saints' world would still arrive so quickly, giving me no time to complete these matters. As a result, I can only leave these incomplete matters to you. In the Neptunian mountains, there is a person and a soul that resides within a set of formation banners. You have threads of karma that link to them, so you should know about them. If you are able to defeat them, you have to find a way to kill them once they leave the Neptunian mountains. If they die, then even if the pernight ore ends up in the hands of people from the saints' world, it'll only be an impressive material. You'll be able to avoid the fate of the immortals' world facing this ultimate weapon. When the samsaric immortal exalt said that, Jian Chen immediately felt his soul throb slightly. The world around him spun as he directly lost contact with that sliver of his soul. The sliver of his soul had dispersed with the samsaric immortal exalt's clone. Chapter 2163, First Senior Sister. Although Jian Chen had lost a sliver of his soul, everything he experienced after it fused with the samsaric immortal exalt was returned to his body, allowing him to clearly remember all that he went through. The samsaric immortal exalt's clone dispersed in the surroundings while Exian hovered in the air unscathed. The overwhelming presence that she gave off before had been withdrawn now. Apart from the radiant glow around her, no one could sense any of her cultivation at all. The power of samsara that permeated the Neptunian divine palace rapidly dispersed under the purification of Exian's light. The power would be reduced to nothing wherever the light reached. In the blink of an eye, not a single sliver of power of samsara remained in the Neptunian divine palace. It was not just the 9th floor. The light had also purified the power of samsara on the 11 other floors. Without the suppression of the power of samsara, the supreme god kings unconscious on the 9th floor all woke up. They were clearly extremely weak, as they had lost large amounts of their vitality. Something as effortless as just standing up had now become extremely difficult for them. What happened? Strange, why was I unconscious? All of them were confused when they woke up as if they could not remember what had just happened. Jian Chen also opened his eyes. He shook his drowsy head and slowly stood up. He glanced around and saw Shangguan Mu'er, Ming Dong, Adriana, Shui Yunlan, Rui Di, and Ji Yi all wake up and stand up with difficulty. Are you all right? Jian Chen endured the powerlessness he felt as he walked over with great difficulty. He asked out of concern. Jian Chen was the same as the people around him, having lost a great deal of his vitality. He was extremely weak right now. The samsaric immortal exalt did not return his vitality to him. However, Jian Shen understood that the samsaric immortal exalt did not return the vitality because he wanted him to be the same as everyone else. Otherwise, it would naturally raise the attention and doubts of the supreme expert present if everyone else was weak while he was fine. That would lead to unwanted problems, or it could even expose his identity. However, even with that being the case, Jian Shen was unsettled and nervous. He knew just how powerful the woman who hovered in the sky was. He had no confidence in hiding his secrets before a supreme expert like that. Once the sword spirits were exposed, he would face unthinkable consequences. So close. It really was so close just then. We almost just died here. The existence of that power actually cut off all methods of communication. I couldn't even ask for help from my 8th senior sister. Ming Dong stood up haggardly as he said in lingering fear. Humph. At this moment, a cold snort suddenly rang out. Only now did all the people gathered there apart from Jian Shen notice the woman who basked in blinding light in the air. She seemed like the sun right now, shining with resplendent light that illuminated the surroundings, turning the gloomy Neptunian divine palace back into daytime. No one could see her face clearly. All they could see was a hazy figure of supreme power. At this moment, Xian ignored the supreme god kings in the surroundings and only glared at Ming Dong. She said coldly, soul injured and vitality lost. If it were not for the god-tier pills, you probably wouldn't even be alive right now. Just a trip to the Neptunian divine palace has almost claimed your life. You really do know how to embarrass the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Under Xian's glare, Ming Dong immediately felt like he was being stabbed by needles. However, he showed no fear. He looked up at Xian and said, "And who are you? What has the matters of our heavenly palace of Bisheng got to do with you?" While Ming Dong said that, the 5 divine generals behind him bowed politely. They all called out, "Greetings to the First Majesty." First Majesty? Ming Dong was startled when he heard the divine general's words. Even all the supreme god kings gathered there became stunned and filled with shock. The words First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bisheng was piercing to their ears. She was a supreme expert who stood at the apex of the world and also a terrifying figure that could make the ancestors of all the peak organizations in the Saints' world suffocate. At the same time, it was because of her existence that the heavenly palace of Bisheng could remain standing in the Saints' world after losing the Inata Grand Prime. At this very moment, a supreme figure that only existed in legends had actually appeared before all the supreme god kings. This threw them into emotional turmoil. Junior greets the First Majesty. Aside from Ming Dong, all the people gathered there bowed politely. Even Adriana and Shui Yunlan bowed. In order to not stand out, Jian Shen copied everyone and bowed towards Xian who was basked in the light. "You're my first senior sister?" Ming Dong stared at Xian blankly as he said in surprise. He had never seen his mysterious first senior sister before. However, when all the supreme god kings present heard Ming Dong's words, they felt like they had been struck by a bolt of lightning, utterly stunning them. Their hearts churned, having become dumbstruck after hearing what Ming Dong had said. They could all tell that Ming Dong was related to the heavenly palace of Bisheng, as he was protected by the 5 divine generals, but none of them knew just how he was connected. However, to all of their disbelief, Ming Dong's relationship with the heavenly palace of Bisheng was actually so astonishing that he could directly refer to the First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bisheng as his first senior sister. They all understood what this meant. It made them tremble in fear as their opinions of Ming Dong were completely overthrown. "You still have the dignity to call me your first senior sister? You've embarrassed both the heavenly palace of Bisheng and Master. I really wonder how 8th Junior has been raising you during all these years," Xian snorted coldly. As if she was extremely displeased with Ming Dong's performance, she lectured him and even seemingly condemned him. With that, she vanished into thin air, directly ignoring the supreme god kings from the various major organizations. It was as if she only saw Ming Dong. Exin's departure made Jian Chen feel relieved. In reality, he felt very unsettled and uneasy when he faced such a powerful expert at such proximity. But fortunately, Exin never paid any attention to him or direct any particular attention to him during the entire time. She completely treated him as thin air. Perhaps it was because of this that the sword spirits had not been exposed to Exin. This was because he knew that with Exin's supreme cultivation, there was no secret he could hide from her if she checked him seriously. The difference in strength was just too great. They were on completely different levels, so even if he wanted to hide it, he could not. So close, only now did Jian Chen suddenly discover that his forehead was covered in cold sweat. That was how nervous he was earlier. I need to increase my strength as quickly as possible. Personal strength has a direct correlation to everything. The more powerful I become, the better I can hide myself before these supreme experts such that they can't see through all the secrets on me with a single glance. Jian Chen's eyes became determined as he secretly made up his mind. Jian Chen, here's a divine pill of opaque heavens. It's specially made for healing vitality. At this moment, Ming Dong arrived before Jian Chen and passed a thumb-sized pill to him. It's actually a divine pill of opaque heavens. That's a 5th-grade god-tier pill. It's extremely precious. The surrounding supreme god kings immediately cried out when they saw the pill. Their eyes lit up as they became envious. Clearly, the divine pill of opaque heavens was precious enough to interest them, even with their backgrounds and origins. Only someone as wealthy as the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng could treat a 5th-grade god-tier pill like it was nothing. There's no need. I have many god-tier heavenly resources here. They're no weaker than your divine pill of opaque heavens. Jian Chen smiled as he took out some god-tier heavenly resources from his space ring. At the same time, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Roy D, and Ji Yi all took out god-tier heavenly resources to recover their expended vitality. Even Shangguan Mu'er possessed god-tier pills. Although it was not as great as Ming Dong's divine pill of opaque heavens, it was still extremely precious. Jian Chen, these heavenly resources are bitter in taste, and their effects are brutal. It can't be easy to refine them. They're nowhere near as gentle as pills. You better use my pills instead. Shangguan Mu'er passed a jade bottle to Jian Chen as her eyes were filled with care. Jian Chen chuckled when he heard that. Don't forget about how my cultivation method is special. It might be very difficult for other people to absorb these heavenly resources, but it'll be effortless for me. Alright, everyone heal up quickly. We still have places to go. With that, Jian Chen wolfed down his heavenly resources and began to recover. However, his heart weighed heavy with worry right now. He thought of what the Samsaric Immortal Exalt had said at the end. I never thought that the real reason why the Taoist sect of Neptunia had been destroyed was because of the Pernite ore on the 8th floor. But why did the Samsaric Immortal Exalt say that I have to kill Chanlong? He even said that once Chanlong died, the Pernite ore would not pose a threat to the Immortals world immediately after it ends up in the hands of people from the Saints world. Perhaps the ultimate weapon that can be created from the Pernite ore is directly related to Chanlong? Or is it because only Chanlong throughout the entire Saints world knows how to use this Pernite ore to forge the ultimate weapon? If that is really the case, it makes sense why the Samsaric Immortal Exalt wants me to kill Chanlong. But Chanlong is only a god king right now. Can he really do something that all the Grand Primes and even Grand Exalts of the Saints world can't accomplish? Jian Chen recovered as he sank into his thoughts. Suddenly, Jian Chen shuddered and opened his eyes. He gazed deeply in the direction of the Neptunian Mountains as he became surprised and doubtful. The Neptunian Mountains, the Grand Exalt's formation. Several million kilometers away, Chanlong and the Python remained on the highest peak of the Neptunian Mountains. They had not moved from there. The Neptunian Mountains was extremely quiet as if the two were the only ones there. However, it was calm and abundant in energy there. The battle between Exin and the Samsaric Immortal Exalt did not reach here. The destroyed landscape filled with violent energy outside made the places seem like two different worlds. Chanlong and the Python beside him remained silent. They stared right ahead in shock. The great battle had not affected the Neptunian mountains, but the terrifying disturbance several million kilometers away still frightened them. At this moment, Ixion's figure appeared silently outside the boundary of the Neptunian mountains. When she appeared, the light around her was completely withdrawn, revealing her appearance. She wore snow-white clothes and seemed to possess great grace. Her serious face also possessed a unique charm, while her eyes that were profound like galaxies seemed to contain countless interwoven laws, conjuring the truths of the laws of the world. She possessed a supreme dignified sense, as if she had surpassed everything, where she could split the world and change the fate of everything just by talking. She was a supreme existence. However, her face bore some politeness right now. She looked at Qianlong and the soul beside him with mixed feelings and bowed slightly. She said out of utter respect, "Junior Exion greets Senior Ancient Paths." Qianlong and the python looked at each other. They could see the confusion in each other's eyes. They did not know who Exion was, but they could vaguely sense that the woman before them was abnormally terrifying and powerful. However, her current actions were puzzling. Perhaps she could see the bewilderment in Qianlong and the python's eyes, but Exion sighed gently. When the Samsaric immortal Exalt of the Immortals world destroyed the Daoist sect of Neptunia in the past, Senior fought the Samsaric immortal Exalt. In the end, Senior's soul was shattered into the 3 spiritual souls and 7 animal souls, scattered in various places. Exion glanced at both Qianlong and the python individually and continued, "Now, Master only has managed to find one of Senior's spiritual soul and animal soul. Master specially ordered me to come to receive Senior, to invite Senior to the heavenly palace of Bisheng so that Master can assist Senior in recovering as soon as possible. Perhaps Senior still does not know who Senior is, but Master has already located the scattered soul fragments beforehand. Master's abilities are tremendous. Since she has personally taken action, Senior's remaining soul fragment will be found very soon. When all of Senior's soul fragments are gathered together, Senior will truly recover Senior's identity and understand who Senior is." Jian Chen arrived on the highest floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace again with Shangguan Mu'er, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Ming Dong, Rui Di, and Ji Yi. Upon setting foot on the 12th floor, Jian Chen gazed at the 4 statues of grand primes that stood in the distance. He sighed emotionally. He could not help but think back to the moment when he had first set foot on the 12th floor. At that time, he had to disguise himself and enter with an extremely low profile to avoid exposing himself. To avoid being identified, he had even avoided the group of people afar. He was nowhere near bold enough to get too close to the 4 statues. But now, when he set foot on the 12th floor again, he had gained a powerful force around him. Not only were there Shui Yunlan and Adriana, 2 outstanding god kings of great power, but there was also Rui Di and Ji Yi, who ranked among the top 10 of the god king's throne. Without a single doubt, a group like this had become the most powerful force in the Neptunian Divine Palace. The number of people on the 12th floor had already decreased. Only a few dozen people sat around the statues. Clearly, these people did not leave the 12th floor, nor did they take part in the fight for the girl. Of course, that did not mean they were not interested in the girl. Instead, they were just realistic, unwilling to contend with the supreme god kings who ranked high up on the god king's throne. However, at this moment, the supreme god kings were extremely weak as well. The power of samsara had drained away a large amount of their vitality, so they were currently recovering as quickly as they could through various pills and heavenly resources. "Mu'er, you go awaken the artifact spirit of your zither first. I'll have a look nearby and see if I can find the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace." Jian Chen stopped before the 4 statues before turning around and talking to Shangguan Mu'er. Shangguan Mu'er nodded and sat down in an empty place. She took out the zither of the demonic cry, controlling it to absorb the mysterious power in the surroundings once again. "We still haven't recovered all of our lost vitality, so we won't be accompanying you. If you need us to take action, just contact us," Rui Di said to Jian Chen before finding somewhere nearby to continue recovering with Jiyu. Brother, I'll go recover quickly as well. I just got scolded by my first senior sister, so I think once I leave here, I'll have to face the lecturing of my 8th senior sister as well. Ming Dong smiled bitterly. Without a doubt, he had been the most injured out of everyone. If it were not for the large number of God-tier pills on him, he probably would not have been able to survive now. Even if he managed to survive through luck, his cultivation would end up regressing. After all, he had used secret techniques that were far too powerful. He had already surpassed the limit he could endure, severely overcommitting himself. Afterwards, Jian Chen left alone. Even Shui Yunlan and Adriana did not go with him. Instead, they remained where they were to recover. The power of samsara had affected everyone in the Neptunian Divine Palace right now. They had lost a great deal of vitality, preventing them from forming any threat to Jian Chen. Moreover, the truly powerful God Kings were all on the 9th floor, so the 12th floor had become extremely safe now. Bang! A million kilometers away from the statues, there was a heavy thud, and a damaged tower covered in sword slashes slammed onto the ground with unimaginable weight. It caused the ground to rumble violently. Xiao Man emerged from the tower. Her big eyes looked around uneasily and eagerly. In the end, they locked onto Jian Chen, and her face immediately became filled with worry. She asked in concern, "Brother Jian Chen, how are you? Are you fine?" "I'm fine. This is the highest floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace. Xiao Man, hold on to this pendant and see if you can awaken the artifact spirit," said Jian Chen. In order to make time, he had only recovered 30% of his vitality before rushing to the 12th floor, so his face was pale and haggard right now. Clearly, he was also weakened. "All right. I'll try right now." Xiao Man took the jade pendant from Jian Chen and bit her finger with expertise, dripping blood onto the pendant. The pendant absorbed the blood. However, even after Jian Chen and Xiao Man waited for a very long time, they still found no traces of the artifact spirit. Has the artifact spirit already died? Jian Chen's heart sank from this. He thought about the artifact spirit's voice that rang out before the samsaric immortal exalt had appeared. If the artifact spirit was really dead, it would be impossible for Xiao Man to take back the Neptunian Divine Palace with her strength. Let alone Xiao Man, even if all the God Kings in the Neptunian Divine Palace worked together, they would not be able to obtain the Neptunian Divine Palace. This was because he already knew that the central point of the Neptunian Divine Palace that needed to be refined was in a region that was not open to the public. Apart from gaining the recognition of the artifact spirit, it could only be reached through overcoming the obstructions with absolute strength. With the toughness of a high-quality God artifact, even weaker Grand Primes would not be able to do something like that. Something like that would only be possible if a peak expert like the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng took action. Jian Chen frowned heavily. He was out of ideas with the problem he faced right now. "I can sense the presence of Master's bloodline again." "Fantastic." Master's descendant didn't die to the hands of samsaric. At the same time, an excited mental pulse emerged from an unknown region within the Neptunian Divine Palace. A powerful consciousness was tightly entrapped in a huge net completely condensed out of energy there. The ancient consciousness struggled relentlessly as it resisted with its full strength. The net around it actually loosened at a visible rate. The ancient consciousness happened to be the artifact spirit that Jian Chen and the others had been searching for the entire time. "I don't know what happened outside, but I can't sense samsaric's presence anymore. He should have vanished. Since samsaric is no longer in control, it's impossible for this secret technique to keep me trapped." "Break!" The artifact spirit called out, and immediately, a powerful energy surged out. As an arrow, it punched a huge hole in the net, finally allowing the artifact spirit to establish a connection with the Neptunian Divine Palace again. Afterwards, under the artifact spirit's control, the great power of the Neptunian Divine Palace swept out like a tsunami, ripping the net to pieces in an unstoppable manner. Brother Jianchen, we can't find the artifact spirit, right? Xiao Man sat on the ground rather powerlessly somewhere on the 12th floor. She supported her chin with her two hands as she looked at Jianchen helplessly. Her pitiful look was heartbreaking. In the past few days, they had gone to many places. Not only did Jianchen travel to everywhere on the 12th floor with Xiao Man, but they even went to the 11th floor. They tried all the methods they could think of in various places to find the artifact spirit, but it all amounted to nothing. It seemed like the method that Xiao Man used to awaken the artifact spirit the first time had become completely useless. Jianchen stood up straight next to Xiao Man, like a sword planted in the ground. Invisible sword intent radiated from his body. At this moment, he stared at the pitch-black sky of the Neptunian Divine Palace. His eyes were very deep as he said gently, "Xiao Man, the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace might have died already." "Humph, who did you say was dead, you little brat?" However, right after Jianchen finished talking, an ancient voice rang out of nowhere. It was filled with great displeasure. The sudden voice immediately alarmed Jianchen. Abruptly, he looked over and saw that a short old man. The old man was only 4 feet tall and just barely reached up to Jianchen's chest. He had appeared beside Jianchen without any prior signs. His head was slightly raised as he stared at Jianchen angrily. Behind the old man was Xiao Man. Whether it was intentionally or otherwise, the old man just happened to stand between Jianchen and Xiao Man, separating the two of them. "You are?" Jianchen's eyes narrowed as he stared at the old man in shock. That was because he could not sense any presence from the old man at all. He found nothing with the senses of his soul, making the old man an existence that could only be found through sight. Almost instantly, Jianchen realized that the short old man was the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace. "Brat, you better watch yourself next time. If you keep blabbering like that, do you believe that you won't be able to leave the Neptunian Divine Palace ever again? You'll be imprisoned here for the rest of your life," the short old man threatened angrily with a scowl. Jianchen stared at the old man and said nothing. Clearly, he was very surprised that the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace was alive and well. "You didn't die at the hands of the Samsaric Immortal Exalt?" Jianchen only asked in surprise a while later. However, when Jianchen said that, the old man leapt up like a cat that had its tail stepped on. Immediately, he fell down and smacked Jianchen's head. He called out angrily, "You little bastard, what are you saying? Do you know how to talk at all? I'll smack you to death. I'm the supreme ruler in the Neptunian Divine Palace, so how can a clone of that samsaric old bastard kill me? Little bastard, are you looking down on me or are you pissing me off on purpose?" Jianchen's head was firmly struck by the short old man. He was the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace, so in here, he was a godlike existence. Jianchen could not put up any resistance at all. Fortunately, the old man's slap did not carry any power. Although it struck Jianchen's head firmly, it failed to injure him. "Uncle, are you the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace?" Xiao Man also stood up from the ground. She looked at the old man in joy and surprise. When she stood up, she was actually a head taller than the short old man. The short old man no longer paid any more attention to Jianchen. He looked at Xiao Man and sensed the presence of Xiao Man's bloodline. His expression gradually became mixed, including deep sorrow within. "That's right. I'm the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace," the short old man confirmed his identity. He looked at Xiao Man with extremely mixed feelings and said, "In the past, after the Samsaric Immortal Exalt destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia, I fell into a slumber due to my heavy injuries. Even now, I haven't fully recovered. If it were not for Master's bloodline that awakened me, I probably would have slumbered for an even longer time. I just never thought that the Samsaric Immortal Exalt had left a clone of his in the palace back then, so when I awakened a few years ago, I faced the attacks of the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. Originally, he wanted to disperse my consciousness, and then take over the Neptunian Divine Palace. Although the Samsaric immortal exalt is powerful as one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortals world, he only left a clone here. He's dreaming if he wants to disperse my consciousness with a clone, the artifact spirit said. As soon as the Samsaric immortal exalt was mentioned, it gritted its teeth in hatred. Xiao Man fell silent. When she heard the artifact spirit mention the Samsaric immortal exalt, she could not help but think of her parents. When she entered the Neptunian divine palace, she learnt that her parents' deaths were closely related to the Samsaric immortal exalt. Your father should be the only grandson of my master. Although my master was an expert who had reached the apex of the saints' world, close to perfection and only second to grand exalts, he had very few descendants. He only had a son and grandson. In the past, when the Samsaric immortal exalt attacked the Daoist sect of Neptunia, only the grandson had been forcefully sent away by master beforehand. He also severed their bloodline connection, allowing him to survive the disaster back then. But the Samsaric immortal exalt is just too powerful. He has grasped the way of karma, so he could use the relationships between the disciples of the Daoist sect of Neptunia to find all the disciples scattered across the entire saints' world effortlessly. His powers of samsara only had to extend along the threads of karma, and no matter how far away they were, they would all die. Master's grandson who had been sent away, your father, had also been found by the Samsaric immortal exalt through his way of karma. Although Master discovered this in time and interfered with the power of laws, forcefully severing all the threads of karma on his grandson from afar, he was still too late. A strand of the Samsaric immortal exalt's power of samsara had already extended out through a thread of karma. The artifact spirit sighed gloomily. He looked at Xiao Man with an extremely mixed expression and said, "You can already imagine the outcome. Although your father was not weak in the past, the difference in cultivation compared to the Samsaric immortal exalt was still too great. Not only did his cultivation regress as he was corroded away by the power of samsara, but he also aged as his life force constantly leaked away. However, since your father could last until then and leave behind you, it really has been a miracle. The Samsaric immortal exalt is one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortals world. Although he only managed to deposit a tiny sliver of power of samsara in your father through Master's intervention, it still should have been impossible for your father to last until then. It looks like someone helped your father in the past." A smear of wonder appeared in the artifact spirit's eyes. Xiao Man had already become tearful when she again heard about how her parents had died. She sobbed as she said through gritted teeth, "My father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather all died because of the Samsaric immortal exalt. He's an evil person, a great, evil person. If I have the ability in the future, I will definitely avenge my parents and my grandfather and great-grandfather that I've never seen. I will personally kill him." At this moment, a seed of hatred had been silently planted in Xiao Man's heart. The Samsaric immortal exalt had killed her entire family, so her hatred towards him had become extremely deep. As Jian Chen looked at Xiao Man's hateful gaze, he could not help but think about his earlier encounter with the Samsaric immortal exalt and how he had passed on his way of karma selflessly. Jian Chen sighed inside. He knew that Xiao Man would probably never be able to reach the same level as a grand exalt. Exacting revenge on the Samsaric immortal exalt might have only been a wish for her, where it was completely impossible. However, he did not want to see a seed of hatred being planted in Xiao Man's heart at such a young age either. I wonder if I was right in helping Xiao Man take back the Neptunian divine palace. Jian Chen looked at Xiao Man and the artifact spirit silently as he felt mixed inside. However, he showed none of this on his surface, as he was afraid that the artifact spirit who had existed for countless years would see something. The artifact spirit's gaze deepened. His ancient eyes burned with hatred as he said softly, "This revenge must be completed. Although the little master may never be able to become Samsaric's opponent, there are many methods to revenge." The artifact spirit looked at Xiao Man deeply and said, "Let's talk about revenge later. The priority right now is for the little master to gain control over the Neptunian divine palace." "I can gain control over the Neptunian divine palace right now?" Xiao Man asked. She had felt eager and excited to gain control over the Neptunian divine palace before she had learnt the exact reason for her parents' deaths. However, she could not light up no matter what right now. Her heart weighed extremely heavily. The artifact spirit coughed gently and said with hesitation, about that. Due to the little master being too weak right now, gaining full control of the Neptunian divine palace is impossible. As a result, I can only take the little master to the central point and have the little master refine the very basic part of the Neptunian divine palace. Once the little master has refined the very basic part, you'll be able to move in and out of the Neptunian divine palace freely. Of course, the little master's current cultivation is nowhere near enough to use the Neptunian divine palace against enemies or to use the power of the Neptunian divine palace. After all, you need a cultivation of chaotic prime at the very least to gain full control over a high-quality god artifact. Maybe even grand prime is required. The artifact spirit looked at Xiao Man, who was nowhere near godhood, helplessly. Probably even he had never considered that the only descendant he had been waiting in slumber for all those years would be so weak. Her level of cultivation could still be described as unfit to be seen. However, the little master is still young and has cultivated for far too short of a period, which is why little master's cultivation is so low. There are a large amount of resources and various records in the Neptunian divine palace. Under my guidance, it won't be difficult for the little master's cultivation to increase, thought the artifact spirit. At this moment, Xiao Man could also tell that she was about to leave here. She said to Jianchen gratefully, "Brother Jianchen, I will never forget about the kindness you have shown me. I'll be leaving with the artifact spirit first, and once I've gained a basic grasp over the Neptunian divine palace, I'll complete my end of the deal." Xiao Man paused before continuing, "Brother Jianchen, since you're all safe now, please bring out Sister Ziyun." Jianchen glanced at the artifact spirit, and after hesitating slightly, he still took out the Inata Tower in the end and let out Ziyun. The Inata Tower. The artifact spirit's knowledge could not be compared to those supreme god kings. The moment he saw the Inata Tower, he immediately recognized it. Shock filled his face as his gaze towards Jianchen became rather strange. "You little bastard, you sure are blessed. Even the Inata Tower, one of the Inata Grand Prime's 3 great treasures, has ended up in your hands. Although I don't know where you got the Inata Tower from, it's an object of desire, so keeping it won't necessarily bode well. Let me give you a piece of advice. You better return the Inata Tower to the heavenly palace of Bisheng as soon as possible. As soon as you become interested in keeping it, those majesties from the heavenly palace of Bisheng will not spare you. Returning it sooner might even benefit you somehow," the artifact spirit said sincerely. With that, the artifact spirit vanished with Xiao Man and Ziyun, leaving Jianchen there alone. Jianchen sighed gently as he looked at the empty space around him. He also left there, directly making his way to the 9th floor of the Neptunian divine palace. Before long, Jianchen stood outside the Neptunian mountains. However, when he arrived there again, all he saw was empty land that stretched into the distance. The Neptunian mountains that originally stood there had completely vanished. "Heya, have a look at where Chanlong is," Jianchen immediately summoned Heya. "Master, I can't sense Chanlong's whereabouts anymore. His soul has either been dispersed, or he has left the Neptunian divine palace," said Heya. Jianchen gazed at the empty land and fell silent. At the same time, in a dark, cold, and lonely region of space outside the Neptunian divine palace, experts from major clans and organizations across the Saints' world had already gathered. They were all scattered around the entrance of the Neptunian divine palace, staring at the structure as they conversed. All of them were primordial realm experts. There were not just a few chaotic primes anymore. With so many of them gathered there, the terrifying presence that permeated the surroundings had distorted space. Even further away, there were countless spaceships. A few people, sometimes more and sometimes less, stood on the decks of each spaceship. They also stared ahead at the Neptunian divine palace that stood silently in outer space like a tremendous primordial beast. What has happened inside the Neptunian Divine Palace? Not only has a large number of Supreme God Kings from the God King's throne died, but a Supreme Expert even suddenly descended and used her terrifying cultivation to bypass the various formations in the Neptunian Divine Palace, forcing her way in. Just who was that woman who was shrouded in light? Her strength was just too terrifying. With my cultivation as a peak infinite prime, I actually shiver in fear before her. All the primordial realm experts discussed with one another as they felt very perturbed. The formations within the Neptunian Divine Palace are so powerful that they can even stop Grand Primes. Yet, that senior used just a few seconds to get in. Is she a legendary Grand Exalt? What? A Grand Exalt? All the primordial realm experts gathered there were shocked and they heard this. In all of their eyes, Grand Exalts were existences of legends. They were existences that could control the laws of the world, truly making them supreme. She's not a Grand Exalt, but she's close. If I've guessed correctly, she should be the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Biyao, an ancient voice rang out. It came from a gray-robed old man who carried a sword on his back. The old man sat on a huge meteor with his eyes closed. His presence was concealed, making him seem like someone ordinary. However, when all the primordial realm experts gathered there looked at the old man, they all revealed fear. Solitary Sword Ancestor, I never thought you'd come as well. At this moment, a great voice boomed through outer space like a great chime. Terrifying sound waves ripped open space, causing huge black cracks to appear in the surroundings. A huge ping that flickered with dazzling azure light shot over from the depths of outer space. He moved at an unbelievable speed as if the concept of distance did not exist before him. He could travel millions of kilometers in a split second. The moment before, he was in the distant depths of space, but in the next moment, he had already arrived outside the Neptunian Divine Palace. He was so fast that it seemed like he could teleport. Azure Peng King. The old man on the meteor opened his eyes as looked at the gigantic Azure Peng that had wings that could shroud the skies. The Azure Peng King had arrived in his original form. His original form was just like his title. He was a gigantic Azure Peng. All of his feathers flickered with azure light and seemed to be as tough as the scales of dragons. A powerful and terrifying energy pulsed within. He hovered in space silently, just like a huge meteor. Even the majestic Neptunian Divine Palace was not a tenth of the Azure Peng King's size. Heavens, I never thought that the person on the meteor was the legendary Solitary Sword Ancestor. Not only has the Solitary Sword Ancestor come personally, but even the famed Azure Peng King has arrived. Coupled with the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Biyao, who entered the Neptunian Divine Palace, just what has happened in there this time? It has raised the attention of so many experts. The primordial realm experts gathered there all engaged in a hot discussion. The presence of the Solitary Sword Ancestor and the Azure Peng King had attracted the attention of many. At the same time, they all felt curious about what had happened in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Of course, many of them had extremely ugly expressions. They had already confirmed through the God King's throne that the prodigies their clans had nurtured with so much effort, their future pillars of support, had died in the Neptunian Divine Palace. It was heartbreaking for them. At this moment, the Azure Peng King's colossal body rapidly shrunk, and he turned into a middle-aged man in azure robes. His gaze was sharp, and his sculpted facial features were filled with a sense of supremacy. Originally, the Azure Peng King and the Solitary Sword Ancestor were several tens of thousand kilometers apart. However, the Azure Peng King moved slightly, and he appeared before the Solitary Sword Ancestor like he had teleported. He did not set foot on the Solitary Sword Ancestor's meteor. Instead, he looked at him from several hundred kilometers away. To supreme experts like them, let alone a few hundred kilometers, even thousands of kilometers would be like inches away. Solitary Sword Ancestor, has your successor also died in the Neptunian Divine Palace? The Azure Peng King asked forcefully, giving off an undisguisable sense of unruliness. The Solitary Sword Ancestor did not move at all from where he sat on the meteor. His gaze remained calm as his expression did not change at all. That's right. My solitary sword lineage never had a lot of people. It's difficult to find a single suitable successor even when I scour the saints' world. It's also exactly because of this that when my lineage was at its peak in history, there were still no more than 5 people. Now at my generation, I only managed to find Gongzheng as the only successor, but he died in the Neptunian Divine Palace. I've come exactly to understand how Gongzheng had died. I'd like to see the junior of which organization disrespected my solitary sword lineage, even going as far as to kill the only successor I found after so much difficult. Although the solitary sword ancestor spoke calmly, all the primordial realm experts gathered there subconsciously shivered inside. Clearly, the solitary sword ancestors in different words were filled with intense killing intent. This king's disciple died in the Neptunian divine place as well. He was the disciple that delighted this king the most. This king held extremely high expectation for him, but this king never thought he would be killed in the Neptunian divine palace. The Azure Pen King's face became extremely sunken. Killing intent filled his eyes, and the surrounding space collapsed from his powerful presence. There's still some time before the Neptunian divine palace closes, and the opening this time is different. The awakening of the artifact spirit might draw out this time. This king is unwilling to wait this long. Solitary sword ancestor, why don't the two of us work together and force our way in? The Azure Pen King suggested. The solitary sword ancestor stared at the Neptunian divine palace deeply. He shook his head. You completely understand how powerful the Neptunian divine palace is. It's very difficult for just the two of us to force our way in. Even if we do succeed, it'll probably take a decade. The people in the Neptunian divine palace would have come out long ago by then. Moreover, the Blood Tier Grand Exalt did say that unless the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace took a master willingly, no one would be able to take the Neptunian divine palace, nor can anyone force their way in. If you really do that, the Blood Tier Grand Exalt would probably arrive personally before you've managed to make your way in. After all, we're not the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bisheng, said the solitary sword ancestor. The real reason why no one dared to eye the Neptunian divine palace for such a long time in the saints' world was because of the Blood Tier Grand Exalt's warning. The Azure Pen King's eyes immediately narrowed when he heard that. The name of the Blood Tier Grand Exalt clearly formed an impressive deterrence. Even the obstinate and unruly Azure Pen King showed deep fear when he heard the Blood Tier Grand Exalt's name. Although the Grand Exalts of the Saints' world rarely interfered with these matters, once they said something, it would represent the will of the heavens, just like an imperial edict. It was truly held supreme, where no one dared to disobey. This is the murderer of this king's successor. May this king ask if anyone recognizes which organization he comes from? There's still some time before the Neptunian divine palace opens, so this king will go pay a visit to the organization behind him first, the Azure Pen King said frigidly as undisguised killing intent radiated from him. He extended a finger and the space before him seemed to become a mirror, displaying a scene where Jian Chen was being hunted down by the many supreme god kings. However, with all the people obscuring the surroundings, there was not a single trace of Jian Chen in the scene. Moreover, aside from a pale-faced, haggard young man, everyone else was blurred. At this moment, the pale-faced, haggard young man stabbed out with his sword. The scene ended there. It was quite obvious that this was what Mo Cheng had seen the moment before his death. The Azure Pen King used a unique secret technique to completely project what Mo Cheng saw before his death. All the primordial realm experts gathered there shook their heads. None of them knew who Mo Cheng's murderer was or where he came from. Even some people who specialized in dealing with information had never seen or heard of this person. The Azure Pen King's face was ugly. Since it only showed the scene before Mo Cheng's death, he only saw the appearance of Mo Cheng's murderer. He had no idea about how the murderer's presence was like. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.